more than a decade, Saturdays and Illegal Curve have been synonymous with one another. With insight, analysis, and interviews regarding the Winnipeg Jets, the Manitoba Moose, and all around the NHL, here are Dave Minuk, Ezra Ginsburg, and your host, Drew Mandel. The Illegal Curve Hockey Show starts now.
Good morning, Winnipeg. Good morning, Manitoba. And for all of those joining us live from wherever you're joining us, good morning to you as well. And welcome to the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. I am your temporary host, Dave Minuk, joined in my maison by Ezra Ginsburg, a little bit lower, a little bit below me. Ezzy, how's it going this morning?
It's going great. It's not the nicest weather out. It's very kind of, Seattle weather, right? Like meaning it's dark and raining a little bit, not that much, but I'm doing well. I had a little bit of a cold earlier in the week, as you know, Dave, but I'm feeling good. And I mean, we've got a hockey game to preview, even though it's preseason, still pretty exciting and tons to talk about with training camp. And most importantly, Dave M, we got rid of the dead weight, right? Like we got rid of Mandel. So, I mean, whenever Drew isn't on the show, it's going to be a gooder. So let's do this.
We're ready to roll. Well, it's funny, as you mentioned the Jets game to preview, because tomorrow they'll be in Edmonton to take on the Oilers. But one of the things we don't know yet, which I still can't understand unless they are intentionally waiting until FanFest, is the announcement of the new play-by-play voice. I mean, it's been 10 days since Stu Count of the Montreal Gazette mentioned that Dan Robertson was the English play-by-play voice on TSN in Montreal, was leaving for a TV gig, but wasn't at liberty to disclose who it was. Pat Hickey actually tweeted at me yesterday saying it is Dan Robertson. But I mean, at the same time, I still think it's very weird, unless they're waiting until FanFest to make some sort of big splashy announcement. That's the only thing that would make sense at this point.
I think that's exactly what's going to happen. And, you've been talking about it on the website, right? In the morning papers, like it makes a lot of sense that you do it at FanFest, right?
Yeah,
like you said,
sure.
I mean, we know that you got to have somebody calling games, starting tomorrow, right? Like you mentioned. So, we talked about it a little bit last week. Dan Robertson is that consummate professional, right? Like he is a guy that has been calling Habs games for quite some time. I want to say 10 years, something like that, right? So
yeah, I think it was like, I think he just finished his 8th or 9th for sure.
Yeah, so I mean, it makes a lot of sense to me that they're going to announce it today at the Iceplex, and what a way to do it, right? That's the way you want to have that kind of grand entrance, and as we talked about, Dennis is one of the best of all time, but I think Jets fans are going to absolutely love having Dan Robertson calling Jets games.
Well, for sure. And I also think part of the holdup may have been that they needed to find a replacement for Sarah as well, obviously, because Sarah Lesky left for a job with the Winnipeg Jets.
Right. And I sent my resume in, Dave, but they were like, we're not really exactly what we're looking for. So unfortunately, I'm not going to replace Sarah. But I mean, another person that's kind of almost impossible to replace, right? But you're right. The two could be related. They might want to announce both at the same time.
Yeah, that was kind of what I suspected. But like I said, I think it does make a lot of sense. And I think that a lot of people are going to be heading down. FanFest is back for the first time since 2019. So a lot of folks in Manitoba, I was at the Iceplex for training camp to the start on Thursday, was day one. And I thought, it was nice to see people back in the building again. Like it's a little bit unusual, but you have that kind of return to normality a little bit, somewhat. But earlier in the week, as we should mention this because I think it was notable, was Kevin Cheveldayoff was in Penticton, of course, for the Young Stars tournament. And he was having a Q&A with The Athletic on one of the days. And one of the things he talked about was the new roles with the head coaches. And as you know, as we had Marty Johnston and Brad Lauer on our show this summer, and neither really got into what their respective roles would be with the team. So we were always kind of like, what is kind of the designation? So now we know Scott Arniel is going to do PK and defense. Brad Lauer is going to do power play and forwards. Marty Johnson he's going to be the eye in the sky. And of course, Wade Flaherty maintains his position as the goalie coach. I thought Marty's role was a little unusual. Like you don't often hear a coach described as the eye in the sky. And
so Marty's basically like Top Gun.
Yeah, well,
like he's Maverick.
Yeah, he might be in all camo because they actually, when Kevin Cheveldayoff followed up with his response, it was he'll include video and tactical assistance. I'm not sure what tactical assistance is going to entail, but the point is that now you have a more defined role for these coaches and what they're going to bring specifically to this Winnipeg Jets team.
Well, and I think, going back to, last year, I think that was kind of one of the issues when Dave Lowry took over. It was
Mhm.
kind of like you're shuffling the chairs on the Titanic, right? And we'll talk to Murat coming up about it, because he talked about this last year. I mean, that was the biggest issue, with the coaching staff, and Mark Scheifele touched on this when he was talking to Elliot Friedman and Jeff Merrick. The Jets basically didn't really know what they were trying to accomplish out there. They didn't really know what their system was, and it was reflected in the play. And I think even though we're only 2 days into training camp here, and they've worked on neutral zone play and defensive zone play, they're going to work on the O zone today, I believe. I mean, you're already seeing it's a little bit more clear, this Jets team, and we'll get into the the forecheck and how the Jets want to play with pressure and everything like that, Dave. But I think this year, a new clean slate. It's a very experienced coaching staff, as you mentioned. Marty and Brad were on the show. Scott Arniel, we know how much experience he has, in the NHL as both a coach and a player. So I think this is going to be much more of a well-oiled machine than it was last year. Not saying that Charlie Huddy isn't a good coach. I'm not saying that Dave Lowry isn't a good coach or anything like that. I'm just saying you can see that this is going to be a much more focused coaching staff, and I think it's going to be much more clear to the players what they're trying to accomplish when it comes to systems and everything like that.
Well, and I think to that idea, is that's what you've been hearing, right? Like Pierre-Luc Dubois talked about how these systems, it already, and again, it's new, but they coach, I thought a lot of the interesting things that have come out of training camp so far is that idea of the change, and it's tangible, right? Rick Bowness said, I don't know, Rick Bowness has been everywhere the last few days, so it's hard to remember exactly when he said this and who he said it to, but he talked about that idea of, the players used to only come in a day before camp. They'd get to Winnipeg, if camp started on 20 or 20, I guess physicals were 21st. So the guys got in on the 20th. Well, he asked them, come in a little bit early, try and get here, show commitment. And he said they responded. That's exactly what they did. And, what did they do? They sent them video in advance of camp starting saying, here's a little bit of pre-camp homework for you because we're going to do things a little bit differently. And I think that's kind of the overarching message right now is that folks, that there's a difference and you can see it, right? And I was there on Thursday and, I probably did more yapping than I did paying attention and picture taking because unfortunately we didn't have any of our photo dogs available. So I was wearing a couple different hats but
we needed content, Dave. You got to, people think that it's all glitz and glamour. Sometimes you got to just pull out the iPhone and take some pictures yourself.
That is true. Exactly. But the point is that you could feel, it felt different. It really did. And it's ironic. I'm going to say that because there wasn't a lot of difference in terms of when the roster was released. Not that we anticipated much. But the only difference was from this year from last was 5 more players. And realistically, the defense was almost entirely the same as the guys who were here last year. The goaltenders, weren't not necessarily all the same because you obviously have a few new faces and the forwards themselves. So it's ironic to say that there's differences because it's really the running it back mentality of having that same team and young guys with opportunity. But that to me was interesting because it felt different on the ice watching these guys. And we can talk to Murat because he wrote about that fairly extensively on his in the Athletic Winnipeg the last couple of days in his day 1, day 2 reports. But I just thought it was a very kind of, not just from the cliche, oh, we got to increase our pace. We got to play with pace. Well, I think every team wants to play with pace. But anyways, the fact is you could just sense that a somewhat tangible change in maybe the physical nature of these practices and also kind of the mental element of it as well.
Exactly. And this is the first time in Jets 2.0 history where you've started a season with a brand new coaching staff, right? Aside from obviously the first year, right? But, it's always been in-season coaching changes, right? When it was Claude Noel to Paul Maurice and then Paul Maurice to Dave Lowry, right? So, you can feel it. And, just listening to Rick Bowness's comments, the first couple of days of camp on Thursday and Friday, he does have a much different style. And in a way, he's more revealing and more straightforward than Paul Maurice. Paul Maurice is a master when it comes to dealing with the media, right? But Rick Bowness, the way he was talking yesterday, he was very matter of factly, right? It was, okay, we're going to do this. And, if some of the players don't like it, then tough luck for them, right? It's refreshing, for us, in addition to the players. The players are obviously the most important because they're the ones that are, tasked with winning hockey games. But, I think Rick Bowness is a guy, we know how much experience he has. He goes back to the Jets 1.0, right? But I think when it comes to not just Bowness, but Arniel, Marty Johnston, Brad Lauer, they bring that fresh perspective, and that rubs off. And you know, you can feel it in the season. And Rick Bowness mentioned this, like, we didn't make the playoffs last year. So he basically, you know, in not exact words, but he said, you know, everything is on the table right now. And it's kind of refreshing to hear that, because when you had the same coach, Paul Maurice, for 6 years, 7 years, I mean, it wasn't fresh. And you knew that even though Paul Maurice was, you know, going to give lip service, you knew that, you know, he was going to go back to that Connor Scheifele Wheeler well, and you know that he was going to go, you know, back to that same old, you know, relying on the veterans and everything like that. And, you know, I'm really looking forward to having Murat on, because it seems like so much more has happened in the first 2 days of training camp than in previous years. There's so many different battles. You know, there's a lot of focus on, you know, some of the younger Jets defensemen like Ville Heinola and Dylan Sandberg, but there's a lot of other, you know, intriguing players that we're going to be able to talk about, namely, you know, Cole Perfetti, who obviously, you know, is expected to have a really big, you know, rookie season for the Jets, right? So there's a lot of excitement right now. And, you know, there's a lot of excitement around the other 31 NHL teams as well, Dave. But I think especially with the disappointment of last year and the fact that you've got that whole new coaching staff, and there's a lot of opportunity for young players this year, you can feel it. Whether that means the Jets, you know, make the playoffs or go to the Stanley Cup final or miss the playoffs entirely, there's definitely that feeling that, you know, this is a different regime and a new opportunity for the Jets to, you know, erase the last year and, you know, how disappointing that was.
Well, as you mentioned, Murat, and so let's bring the man, the myth, the legend into the show. A little bit of our 9:15 start, a little bit earlier, because Murat has to get down to the Iceplex so he can pay attention and write those extensive end of day.
I thought Murat was at the Iceplex. That looks like the Iceplex behind him.
Doesn't quite look like the Iceplex just yet, unless he's got a personalized room there. So we'll welcome Murat Atesh of the Athletic Winnipeg. Hey, Murat, how are you?
Hey, I'm doing well. You know, this is my VIP suite at the Iceplex. You guys haven't seen it. It's behind one of those doors that just looks nondescript. This is my suite. I hope you guys don't mind.
I think I would have found that on that first year when the AHL played out of the during the pandemic year in the All-Canadian division. I would have definitely, I lived at the Iceplex, so I suspect I would have had access to that VIP room had it existed. But we'll let's get right into it, Murat. How was your first couple of days at the Iceplex and taking in the newness? That's what Ezzy and I have spent the first 15 minutes of the show talking about, the kind of tangible feel of a difference amongst this Jets team, even though it is, ironically, largely the same team.
Yeah, exactly. And first off, thanks for having me at 9:15 so I can hightail it back there. But the first couple of days for me, the real story, I think, is the preparedness of Rick Bowness and the staff. You know, this is the first camp that we've seen that Paul Maurice hasn't run in ages and ages. And certainly the on-ice product that we all remember down the stretch last year under Dave Lowry was disorganized. There was a sense that, you know, I broke down some neutral zone stuff where it looked like Winnipeg wasn't able to commit to its 1-1-3 or whatever it was aiming for in neutral zone defense. The defensive zone was an issue. They weren't even scoring as much as you would typically expect. And of course, the season ends with all of that, you know, we're not necessarily playing for each other talk. And to kind of come in, full circle is not the right phrase, but like a complete turn since then. Training camp, the first couple of days has been everything it's needed to be. It's clear to me that Rick Bowness and his staff are really focusing on the education. They're sending video packages in advance. They sent video packages for, I think, defense, neutral zone, and forecheck. A few days before camp started. They start each morning with the video sessions. There's plenty of whiteboard teaching. There's a dialogue between the players where they're asking questions, what reads that they're making. And you can see a level of detail and organization on the ice that was definitely missing last year. So early returns are good. And that's my first impression.
Yeah, and we got to give you tons of credit, like we always do. I mean, we share everything on illegalcurve.com, and we always love having you on, obviously. But I obviously wasn't able to be at training camp. But, you know, reading your work in The Athletic, I feel like I'm completely caught up, which I absolutely love, right? Like, I feel like Murat didn't leave anything out here. Like, he's talking about, you know, Mikey Esimon again and his energy as being a potential guy that could crack the fourth line. Like you were saying, you know, hold the brakes on the Ville Heinola, you know, hype train. I absolutely love it. And I wanted to ask you about that because, you know, there's definitely going to be, you know, some roster battles when it comes to the forwards, but I think you'd agree the top 9 is pretty set. Even the top 12, I think you could argue. But when you're talking about, there was a line in your article yesterday, your day 2 notes, talking about Dylan Sandberg passing Logan Stanley permanently on the depth chart, right? And I think you'd agree that last year in his 15 games, Sandberg, I think, did that in that small sample size, right? So my question is, and we're going a little ahead of ourselves here because we still got lots of training camp and preseason, but how do you balance the, Rick Bowness saying he wants to get more than 24 goals from his defense, and he wants to play a quick transition and a quick puck moving game and using all that speed? I'm not saying Dylan Sandberg's a slow player, Murat, but Ville Heinola, I mean, is your prototypical puck moving defenseman. I guess how do you see him managing the whole Dylan Sandberg, Ville Heinola, Logan Stanley dynamic? Because that to me is what's most fascinating about not just training camp, but how that's going to play out throughout the year.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I'll give a shout out to, say, Declan Chisholm as well, who I don't think is in the mix for a job, but is in that mix talent wise. And you guys are all over the AHL, and he was so good last year. The dynamic is interesting to me because on paper, if you just want to look at all the reasons why Rick Bowness might be a fit for the Winnipeg Jets, you'd look at the way he transitioned the leadership group in Dallas to a younger group, and you'd see younger players like Jason Robertson or Rope Hintz getting more and more minutes. And already we've seen Nikolai Ehlers at the top line, Cole Perfetti's in that top 6 with Pierre-Luc Dubois and Blake Wheeler. So you see that. You also look to the offense from defense in Dallas. And if you look just at goals, they got 30 goals out of their defensemen last year, so a 6-goal improvement over what Winnipeg did. You might have thought with Miro Heiskanen and John Klingberg there'd be even more, but then you get into their playmaking and the offense that they create, and that's where the extra comes in as well. And the story's perfect because he's talking about we're going to have our defensemen jump in, and he's saying that. And he's saying that they need more goals from the defense. And the forwards in camp, Pierre-Luc Dubois was saying it's a dream come true when you see that second wave of offense coming in. And gosh, you think, well, okay, well, that's Ville Heinola's music. Not only that, but Miro Heiskanen was the one player he was willing to admit that he idolized the day that he was drafted. This is a perfect fit, and he's going to shine in it. And then you watch yesterday during the scrimmage, he picks up a puck at the blue line in the offensive zone, and from almost a standstill takes one step around Daniel Torgerson so quickly that all of a sudden you've got a little 5-on-4, and you're looking at him and you're like, that's exactly it. A little later, he's trying to wheel through the neutral zone, and there's a little bit of a giveaway that was a bit unnecessary to Evan Pole. And you remember that this isn't a perfect player. Winnipeg doesn't need him to be a perfect player. They need to be patient with whatever mistakes he makes. And Rick Bowness spoke to that yesterday as well. The reason why I think, and why I'm interpreting, this is just my read based on what Bowness said, that it may be about pumping the brakes on Heinola right now, is because Bowness said, I'm really excited about these young defensemen that we have in the system that also have size and can get physical. And that is not Ville Heinola's game. He's a good positionally sound. He's competitive. There's some dirty cross checks in there from time to time that help him assert his position, but he is not Dylan Sandberg in that way, and he's certainly not Logan Stanley in that way either. So then if you're going to the Stanley versus Sandberg battle, I just think Sandberg can do more. His game is better rounded. When he contributes to the offense, there's a little bit more. When he tries to transition through the neutral zone, I feel like he's in better control. And I honestly think at this stage of his career, his defensive reads are more sound as well. I don't think that Logan Stanley had the greatest defensive season last year, and he's got plenty of room. Day 3 of camp begins very shortly to right that. But in my way of thinking right now, Sandberg has surpassed them and is the most likely young player to make that defensive group.
Well, we're joined by Murat Atesh of The Athletic, Winnipeg, on the Illegal Curve Hockey Show this Saturday morning. And Murat, one of the, as he said it in our first kind of opening segment, hope springs eternal for not just the Winnipeg Jets organization, but for all 32 NHL teams right now. Everybody's excited about training camp. And most Jets fans, even though there's some consternation about the concept of running it back, think, well, maybe with new systems, this team could be something that they were supposed to be last year, and they weren't. They fell short. Well, if they read The Athletic today, they might not be so encouraged because the season preview doesn't exactly glow. So what would you do to offset that, to maybe give Jets fans a little bit of hope from what your colleagues have written about the Winnipeg Jets expectations this season?
Yeah, I read that just before I came on. And so for my money, I honestly think the Dom Lucian and Company's season previews are as detailed as it gets in the entire business of sport. I think that it's a must read, whether it ends landing in a way that you support or in a way that you don't necessarily agree with. I think that there's so much covered and there's such standardization, right? He's not just reviewing the Winnipeg Jets through the model that he's put together. It's all 32 teams held to the same standard. And I think that that's really unique, and he does it in such detail. And at the same time, he needs to acknowledge and does acknowledge that there are limitations of a model. For example, last season, heading into the year, Josh Morrissey was presented as a replacement level, like, you could get one of these guys anywhere type defenseman by the model, based on the fact that he struggled for a couple of years. Meanwhile, I was sitting there at training camp going, you know what? First impression, out of every player on the ice, Josh Morrissey is faster. He's more assertive. He's wiring these one-timers that are at a level that he hasn't necessarily done in the last little while. Sure enough, when I talked to Morrissey later in the season, he's talking about all of the training changes that he was able to make. He had a full summer after the passing of his dad. He had been going through so much. And you get to a combination of the human elements, the training elements, and all those sorts of things. And his results, obviously, last season were excellent and not what a model would have predicted, even if it was making reasonable math conclusions off of what had happened for the last couple of seasons. So to read a preview like this, you sort of have to understand the language that it's speaking in. It's not just, it doesn't say what I like, it must be awful. But if there's valid reasoning like that, like it was in Morrissey's case last year. So in this case, I've just come from reading it before I spoke to you, and it's pessimistic. It projects 88 points. It projects missing the playoffs. It talks about the top six as a little bit overrated. It talks about Mark Scheifele, Kyle Connor, Blake Wheeler as good offensive players, but among the worst defensive players in the NHL. It says the defensive group is nothing special, and essentially concludes that Connor Hellebuck needs to be one of the few best goalies in the NHL for Winnipeg to make the playoffs. And if you're looking through the lens of a model, I actually completely understand that. The last couple of seasons for all of those players defensively has not been good. We saw the defensive mess that was the Winnipeg Jets last season. And I think that that's a realistic assessment of what happened. And then the question is, why did it happen? And was it because these forwards are incapable of having a positive impact? Or was it because a very, very low tide was sort of sinking every boat in that situation? And that's where the hope comes in. This is a situation, this isn't a Jets team that we know what is as the season begins. It's about becoming the best version that it can be, ideally with the new systems, ideally with better leadership, because the changes have only been at the top. They've not been on the ice, they haven't been in the roster. So it's all about systems and all that sort of thing. So I think it's reasonable to say, we don't know how good these Jets are going to be, that they've struggled in recent seasons, even defensively the year that they made it to the Canadian division and they won the first round of the playoffs. That wasn't a perfect team. Even if there's a tremendous improvement, there's going to be growing pains, because this is the exact same group of guys that when things proverbially hit the fan last year, kind of quit on each other, or at least the back checking stopped and certain things like that. So what we need to do, I think, is temper the optimism that the coaching staff brings with a realistic assessment that there's a lot of growth that needs to happen in this team. And at some point this season, even if the vibes are so positive right now, the team's going to get punched in the mouth. And how they respond to that, it will, I think, go a long way to determining what version of itself that the team gets to be under Bowness and company.
Yeah, and it's hard to disagree, Murat, with anything you said there, right? Like, I think you make a really good point when you say that we don't really know what this team is now, and we might not know until a few months into the season. And Dom, I agree with you. And I know you're not just saying that because you work for The Athletic, but I mean, he is unbelievable, and it is must read. And it is very similar. He follows a similar template when he's previewing all 32 teams. And one, before I ask the next question, I do think that, when I look at that division, I think, and again, he's way more into the mathematics than I am. But when you look at that division, I think a team like the Minnesota Wild is going to miss Kevin Fiala a lot. And we all know that Colorado is the best team in the division. But my whole point was, how much better is Dallas than the Jets? How much better is Nashville than the Jets? I don't think they're that far off. And when you're talking about an 88-point projection, I mean, if it takes 95, 96 points to get into the playoffs, you're talking about 3 or 4 wins. We know how many times the Jets lost to, teams that were much worse than them. I think a big factor too this year is going to be almost which team beats up Chicago and Arizona the most, right? Because those teams are going to be very bad this year. So I agree that right now we don't know how good the Jets are going to be, even though Dom has them at 88 points. I easily could see the Jets being in the high 90s there. I wanted to ask you about Blake Wheeler because there was and again, your notes column was so in depth that it's almost like I was literally screenshotting it, Murat. That was my research last night. But you made a point. There was one thing talking about Blake Wheeler and how he was burned on one play. I'm not sure if it was by Scheifele or it was somebody. He was burned on a specific play, but I didn't want to ask you about that specifically. But I wanted to ask you, just about what your impressions have been of Wheeler, right? Because this is a very weird situation to not have Captain Blake Wheeler, just mortal Blake Wheeler, if you want to call him that, right? So what have your impressions kind of been just about how Wheeler has conducted himself, on the ice in the first 2 days of training camp and off of it? Because I think, you would agree that if the Jets are to be successful and ultimately make the playoffs, I mean, Wheeler is going to factor in big time, whether he's on, the first line, the second line, the third line, whatever.
Yeah, you need at least two lines that can score. If you're running an Adam Lowry checking line with Mason Appleton and presumably Jansen Harkins, you're going to need that top six to win against the other top sixes that it plays against. And it really only does that if Wheeler can still do what the best of Wheeler is, or close to the best of what Wheeler is in that regard. He scored as a top six winger. He scored as about a second line winger at even strength if you just use points per minute of ice time and then sort of sort by, from top to bottom of the league. He was in the middle of the second line pack. So he can still do things in that regard. He's not some sort of washed player at 36 years old. But of course, there's so many storylines going into this season, notably the loss of the captaincy. And if that was not known to me, I would think, watching training camp for the first couple of days, that he is a veteran who is a good NHL player, a lock to make a team, a smart, intelligent, positionally sound player. There's so many new positions and systems going on right now, and they worked day one all on the neutral zone. So in this example I give in the piece, where Blake Wheeler actually does get burnt on a give and go between Mark Scheifele and Nikolai Ehlers, who were just flying so far, so fast up the boards. The thing I noted right before that was, look how Wheeler gets exactly into the 1-2-2 position. Like, he anticipates what's happening in the offensive zone. The puck's going to get turned over. He gets into position right away. And that's just a smart player being smart, going to the right spots. And then certainly Scheifele and Ehlers flying up the ice, a give go, Wheeler chases, and the two younger guys sort of, are able to make ground on him. And that's what I call getting burned. I mean, in any other year, that would probably be completely normal stuff, because we know a lot of the veterans don't really get going until towards the end of the preseason and into the season itself, right? It was day 2 of camp, and it should be seen that way. But at the same time, I think, it's just a completely reasonable thing to think that this is not one of the best 3 players on Winnipeg's forward group right now. And as long as he handles himself professionally and is a good teammate and does the things that the coaching staff asks, he'll be a helpful member of the team. And that's what I've seen so far. He's just one of the guys. He's fit in. He hasn't done media since last week or what have you, but that's not out of some disrespect or like we've asked. We just had him a few days ago, so I think it makes sense to have him have that break. So I think that early on, and I've written that it could be an awkward dynamic, and I still believe that, depending on what happens through the season, it could be. But early on, things look good on that front.
Well, Murat, I know you got to get to the Iceplex, so I'm going to try and let you go, but I'm going to ask a 2-parter. So my first part of the question is, what players have jumped out at you so far after, and again, admittedly, only 2 days of camp, so we have to temper it a little bit, but what players, maybe 1 or 2 players have jumped out at you, and this could be part maybe tied in or not, but one of the young players, the Brad Lamberts, the Chaz Luciuses, what are you seeing from those guys? Are you seeing the potential for those guys yet to make it? I know Brad Lambert's dealing with something right now, but are you seeing anything from them that would say, hey, there's a potential these guys are challenging for an NHL roster spot, or AHL or WHL?
Well, I'll start with the young guys. And yeah, certainly Lambert missed yesterday, but was flying the day before. I don't think that either one of Brad Lambert or Chaz Lucius is really a threat to make the NHL roster. I don't think that's in the cards at 19 years old in both of their cases. And with such a top 12, you can just look at the veterans and the waivers exempt players and build a 4th line with David Gustafsson, Dominic Toninato, and Sam Gagner, and kind of like all systems are go. If anybody jumps into that group, it could be Morgan Barron, who has missed the first couple of days and certainly had a good NHL Jets debut last year. So I don't think that's what's in the cards for them. But when they get their opportunities on the ice, they look like players that, were drafted in the first round. It's easier for Brad Lambert to stand out just on account of his speed, but Chaz Lucius has been competitive as well. I'd like to see them in preseason action and with players more of their ilk, right? Because what happens to young guys in this situation is they play with depth players, and they're not going to be lined up with Kyle Connor and Mark Scheifele right now. And so that's that. I don't see an NHL future for them this season. Ideally, they have wonderful AHL debuts like Kyle Connor and Jack Roslovic did when they were 19 years old. In terms of the other guys, it's easy to say Kyle Connor is a spectacular player, right? We could fill our boots with all of that, and we could go with all the stars. I have been struck at just how fast he can move, Kyle Connor, through traffic with his head up. Like, one of the things that you notice that seems to differentiate the elites from the not as elite is what they see, and what you're guessing at what they see when they're on the ice. And when Kyle Connor is navigating his way through traffic at the speed that he moves at, that we've all seen beat goalies so many times, well, you notice that his head is up in a way that these young kids, they have to look down, they have to scan around a little bit. Kyle Connor always, and it's just impressive to see those types of details in the elites. In terms of the more bubble players, Saku Maenalainen and Kevin Stenlund, each, I think Maenalainen is 28 and Stenlund is 26, or the opposite, pardon me. So they're veteran players who've played professionally, whether overseas or in the AHL. Each has a couple of NHL games to their experience as well. And they just look bigger, stronger, faster to me than all of the younger players do, as they should as professionals. So I'm thinking if somebody who's not a name player sneaks into that fourth line mix, I think it could come from that group. Mikey Eyssimont, I don't know that he's an NHL player this year unless injuries happen, but man, I love the way that guy plays hockey. So competitive, so intense. He's a pain in the ass for players who have paychecks much bigger than his, and he's beating them in one-on-ones. He's battling and making life difficult. Jeff Malott, you can see why he's a Manitoba Moose, like such an important player for them as well. Those are the ones that I've thought to myself, well, hey, if things bounce just right for them, I can see why they may play NHL games in the not incredibly too distant future. And then the battle is, Heinola's shininess versus Dylan Samberg and Logan Stanley. And we've talked about that. Declan Chisholm, I'll just end with a shout out for him because I've liked how he plays too.
Yeah, he's definitely a prospect that a lot of people don't pay attention to, but they really should. He was the best defenseman by far in the playoffs for the Manitoba Moose. And, a number of times throughout the year, he was one of the best. So he's one who's not as heralded because he's a fifth rounder, but he definitely deserves consideration because once you're drafted, that all goes out the window. We remember it. But once it's what you're doing on the ice, and you're right, Murat, he is absolutely a phenomenal young prospect, just a beautiful skater. Okay, well, we're not going to keep you any longer because we know you've got to get to the Iceplex, so you'll have an extensive.
Your fans are waiting.
Day 3 of training camp. Although I will say, Murat, I felt a little big time by you. You were sitting with the people. You didn't come in the media section on Thursday, so I didn't get a chance to say hello to you.
Murat is a man of the people, though.
He was a man of the people. He was sitting in the stands. I spotted him immediately. I was talking to Huss. And I looked over. I said, "Oh, there's Murat. He's over there. He's sitting, not standing." But it was.
If I hang out with you guys, I'm just gonna talk and catch up and laugh and be merry, and then my notepad's gonna be empty by the end of things. Right? I gotta sit down, gotta write my notes.
Yeah, no, I think that's a better play because as I wrote in my camp notes on thing, I said I was too busy yapping to actually pay attention to the lines, but thankfully other people did. But anyways, Murat, we always appreciate your time and your insight on the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. So thank you very much for joining us.
Love you, my man.
And like I said, have a good day at Iceplex, and there'll be a big crowd there because it'll be Fan Fest, so you should have a good time.
Right on. Thanks, guys.
All right, there he goes. Murat Atesh of the Athletic Winnipeg joining Ezzy and I on the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. Ezzy, I think it's time for our first commercial break of the day. So let's head to commercial break, and we'll be back after these words from our sponsors.
Keeping Winnipeg laughing for over 30 years. Rumors, Canada's longest-running comedy club, bringing you the biggest laughs from the best comedians on the planet. Jerry Seinfeld, Chris Rock, Jon Stewart, Dennis Miller, Brad Garrett, the greats, and all the up-and-comers too. When was the last time you laughed out loud? Make it a great night out with friends, or book your office or birthday party. Even a fundraising event at Rumors. Get all the details and dates on upcoming shows at rumorscomedyclub.com.
Hi, Ez. A strange question for you. But why are you lying on the ground being crushed by a piano?
Well, Drew, I definitely tried to carry this baby grand piano down the stairs by myself, and somehow I failed miserably.
Right. Yeah, I'm sorry. That was a silly question on my part. My apologies. would you like me to call Rolly's Transfer Moving and Storage to help you move the piano? They are the most experienced piano moving company in Winnipeg, after all.
Yes, please call Rollies and hurry. This piano is very, very heavy.
Rolly's Transfer Moving and Storage offers stress-free residential moving services while taking great care of your personal belongings, including your piano. At Rolly's, no job is too big or too small. For more information, visit rollys.com.
Hi, it's Drew from Illegal Curve here. Selling your home can be stressful, but it wasn't for me. Thanks to my friends at Zappia Group Realty, they made the process so easy. My home sold within 48 hours and with multiple offers. Zappia Group Realty took care of everything with their exquisite customer service and attention to detail. If you want to sell your home for more in less time, get started by talking to Frank and Mauro Zappia of Zappia Group Realty. Online at zappiagroup.com.
Hey, Drew.
Ezzy, whoa, what a smile!
Yeah, I got my crowns done at Linden Market Dental Center, and they whiten my teeth.
I see.
They're so bright that every time I smile, they go...
We have hockey tonight. Do you have a mouth guard to protect those pearly whites?
I sure do.
Whoa, they even ting through the mouth guard.
Linden Market Dental Center covers all your dental needs, from restorative to cosmetic dentistry, and will fit you with a sports guard for that active lifestyle. 877 Waverly. See lindenmarketdental.com.
So you're a pizza person, you married a wing person, but somehow your kids are salad people. You can't pick your fam, but you can pick your BP meal deal, starting from $18.99 for takeout or delivery at bostonpizza.com.
Welcome back to the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. I am your host, Dave Minuk. We're in David's room right now. I'm joined by my boy, Ezzy Ginsburg. Ezzy, how you doing?
I couldn't be better. We're talking hockey on a Saturday morning, and there's no Mandel. So I mean, this is about as good as it gets. I mean, the weather. I'm looking outside here. I'm in your dining room here in beautiful River Heights. It's not really the nicest day out there, but so what? I mean, not every day is going to be nice. We had a pretty decent week. I think I can't really remember it. This week was absolutely crazy. My kids almost killed me. But yeah, I mean, things are awesome. It's the beginning that we always talk about this, right? This is the best time of year if you're a sports fan. You've got hockey starting, you got NFL, Major League Baseball, regular season's wrapping up. Did Aaron Judge hit 61 yet, by the way?
I don't know. He hit his 60th. I'm not sure if he got to 61.
I was talking to our
Albert Pujols hit his 700th yesterday.
Yeah,
699th and 700.
He has to go down as one of the best power hitters of all time. I don't know if he's number one, but Pujols is like. Yeah, I mean, you know baseball. Impressive. You know baseball way more than I do, Dave. You've won multiple championships with the House of Ashkenazi. I'm just a low level baseball fan, but Pujols is the man, and Aaron Judge is also the man. He's got, I think, 10 games left to hit 61. So he's obviously, going to do it. He's just an unbelievable treat to watch.
Sorry, as I took a quick little break to answer Alex, who asked, where is Drew? And I just saying he's not ill. He is taking some time.
Parts unknown.
Yeah, he's in parts unknown with his family. So he is all is well with Drew. He's just not with us, which means all
we would
is well
say,
with
but he doesn't want to be, absolutely flooded by the paparazzi, right? Like
that's true.
If we say where he is in Manitoba, he's outside of Winnipeg. Let's just say that. But he's always worried that all of a sudden TMZ is going to show up and Entertainment Tonight is going to show up and eat everything like that. So we'll just keep that under wraps.
Well, and Ezzy, I thought your question to getting into the Jets talk again, I thought one of your questions to Murat was a good one because it's true. Like, how are the Jets?
What about all of them? I thought they were all good.
Well, they were all good, but I think one specifically jumps out and it kind of leapfrogs us into this next segment. It's because it's that idea of more offense from the defense when you're playing tighter defense, right? And one of the things that Rick Bowness talked about was, and he mentioned it numerous times in his media availability, was 24 goals from the defense and how it's just simply not good enough and that they need more production. And you're right. That would seem to suggest that Ville Heinola is, a guy who's going to be able to bring some offense to this lineup and not necessarily just in goals, but in other capacities and facilitation. So how do you see it playing out? And I mean, it's obviously tied into the whole idea of like how that top six defensively. I think the Jets are going to end up carrying 8 defensemen personally throughout the course of the year. just because of
Absolutely they will.
Because of the waiver situation, right? Like they don't want to lose Logan. I mean, look, unless they make a trade, which is obviously a possibility over the next 21 days or whatever it is before the season starts. But once you have to start cutting down that roster to get to, you know, your 23-man roster, I don't see a Jets team that isn't going to be worried about losing Johnny Kovacevic, because if you put him on waivers,
you're not losing.
He's gone.
That's right off the bat. You're not losing Johnny Kovacevic.
Right.
I mean,
so you're carrying
eight
8 defensemen, and guys waiver exemption may work against them, right? Like Declan Chisholm, okay, he'll go back and play in the AHL. That's fine because he'll be the top guy with the Moose. You got
if there wasn't so many guys on the left side, by the way, Declan Chisholm might be a guy, you know, he's 22 years old now, 23 years old now. He's a guy that might actually, you know, crack that roster. But with Sandberg, Heinola, and Stanley there, I agree with you. I think it's inevitable, Dave, that he goes back and plays a full season for the Moose. And you know what? The Moose are probably going to love that. Mark Morrison isn't going to be complaining about that because, I mean, you know this, but a lot of people who don't follow the Moose just don't really know how good Chisholm is. Like I don't know, is he a top 10 defenseman in the AHL? Like this is a guy who has an NHL future for sure.
Yeah, and Rob's saying that, you know, don't sit a Heinola, 21-year-old need to play. AHL is not a bad place. Rob, you'll never hear me say the AHL is a bad place. I'm all for guys playing games, and you know, whenever young guys specifically would be called up and then sit in the press box, I raged against it because it's such a waste of time. Look, practicing is beneficial, and there's a different level of an NHL practice, obviously, than what you get in the AHL. But to play AHL games is vastly preferable than sitting in the press box eating popcorn. Although that's a bit of a myth. The guys don't really tend to do that anymore. So at least in the
they're drinking like BioSteel. They're not really eating popcorn.
That's right.
Even though one of my favorite Buff memories, you remember this, Dave, because I came back and I was so excited to tell you my little story. But it was a rare occasion when Buff was in the press box. I forget what year it was and why he was in the press box, because obviously he would normally be on the ice, but he was injured. And I remember, you know, as you know, and the media knows, like they put out the popcorn between the first and second intermissions, right? So my trick used to be like I would go a little bit earlier, but I missed that opportunity and I was late. And, you know, Buff had made his way there and he was looking for popcorn. I was looking for popcorn and it was all gone. And he looked at me and he's like, "No more popcorn?" And I was just like, I love you, Mr. Bufflin. But I mean, that was just a funny moment.
And then you were escorted out of the press box. Yeah, like, how did you get in here?
Exactly. And then I lost my media credentials, which I still don't have back to this day. But no, going back to, you know, what you were saying about the defense and Heinola, Sandberg. I mean, this is going to be the storyline all year long because, I mean, clearly the Jets aren't moving a defenseman. I honestly thought the Jets were going to move a defenseman, but it was nothing personal against Brendan Dillon or Logan Stanley. But you just look at that left side, and it feels like we've been talking about this for 20 years. Right. We've definitely been talking about this for a couple of years. The Jets' strength is on the left side. And when you have, you know, these young defensemen that need to play, something has to give. And, you know, a guy like Kyle Capobianco, who formerly, I think the last team he played for was the Coyotes. I know he used Arizona. To play for the Coyotes. Yeah. He would be the guy that I think you would waive, right, Dave? Like that would be because there's no history there. And again, nothing against him. Capobianco is a pro defenseman. But, you know, Johnny Kovacevic, you know, is a guy that we've said multiple times is your perfect kind of number 7 defenseman. So he's a guy that, you know, you want to have in the mix, and he'd be the first guy up that, you know, would in theory play if one of your top 6. The top 6 is set in the first 5 positions, the 5 veterans. We know who those 5 veterans are. Right. It's between Dylan Sandberg, Ville Heinola, and Logan Stanley. And going back to our conversation with Barad, I mean, it just makes a lot of sense that Sandberg, he's due, you know, to be a staple in that top 6. But as we know, injuries happen, you know, guys go through slumps and everything like that. But, you know, I am on board with, you know, Sandberg. You know, if you're asking me who the opening night roster is going to be on that left side, I see Morrissey, Dillon, and Sandberg. And, you know, it does create a bit of a tricky situation because the one thing that you don't want to have is, as you mentioned, Heinola in the press box. Right. So he's either got to be playing top pairing minutes with the Moose, or he's got to be playing, you know, in the top 6 for the Jets. He's got to be playing. So, I mean, I'm a big fan of Heinola, and I think a lot of people don't want to see another year of Heinola in the NHL, AHL. He's 21 years old, guys. Like, let's pump the brakes. He was drafted in 2000. Was it 2019 or 20?
Yeah,
I forget.
19.
But 19. So it's not like he's 25 years old. Let's not start comparing him to Sami Niku. This is not Sami Niku. Heinola is a first-round draft pick who was the best defenseman at the World Juniors. The Jets want to see him succeed in the NHL. It just might not happen as soon as some people would like. So I think, Samberg has got to play at this point. 2017 draft. He's 23 years old. In 15 games last year, like he proved that he's ready for the NHL. He's a man. He's big. He can move the puck. He can handle himself. Good defensively. So for me, it's time for Samberg to shine in the NHL. And if that means that Heinola plays significant minutes in the AHL, Dave, well, so be it. And if Logan Stanley and Johnny Kovacevic are your 7th and 8th defensemen, I mean, I think that's fine. Really, what is going to determine, a lot of what happens is how quickly the Jets adapt to Rick Bowness's new system.
Right.
And, what players flourish in it and what players struggle in it. So, I mean, just because, Samberg is your opening defenseman on the left side, third pairing defenseman, doesn't mean that Ville Heinola is not going to play any games in the NHL or Logan Stanley is not going to play any games in the NHL.
Of course not.
I think all these guys are going to play games in the NHL. And throughout the course of a season, you typically use, 10, 11, 12 defensemen.
For sure.
So I wouldn't be surprised if, a guy like Johnny Kovacevic plays, 5 games, 10 games, 15 games. Who knows? If there's a bunch of injuries on the right side, he might end up playing 40 games.
Right.
So yeah, there's definitely some internal competition there. But just based on what Rick Bowness has said about how he wants to use his defensemen, I think Samberg has the edge. And I do think the Jets need more offense. A guy that I mentioned a couple weeks back, Dave, that I think is really primed for a bounce back year offensively is Neil Pionk. Right? Neil Pionk's first year with the Jets, we know how successful he was. He's a guy to me, that I would expect a bounce back offensive year. And Nate Schmidt is another guy. Nate Schmidt is a guy that, not only can get it done on the power play, but this is a guy that has the ability to rush the puck up, get involved in the play, score some goals. So I don't know how many goals that's going to translate to, but I definitely think we're going to see more than 24 goals from the D this year.
Well, and it's so funny because it's such an interesting conundrum, right? What do you do? Because look, our guy's going to ask to be traded. If Ville Heinola has to go down to the AHL, is he going to ask for a trade because he thinks he should be in the NHL? I mean, when I've talked to the coaches in the AHL, like whether it's Pascal Vincent or Mark Morrison, you know what they say? They want guys to be pissed off about being in the AHL. They don't want guys to have shitty attitudes. They want guys to give their full effort, but they don't want guys to be satisfied with like, oh yeah, no, it's fine. It's all good that I'm in the AHL. They don't want guys who are happy with where they are. They want guys who are going to put their best skate forward and give their best effort, of course. But nobody is satisfied with, being in the AHL because the NHL is like, as much as people love the AHL, the NHL is the best league in the world. And that's where you want to play. And that's where you want to be able to, assert your dominance. And look, the fact of the matter is, and it was one of the questions that was asked yesterday to Rick Bowness in the media availability, which you can listen to on a little site called illegalcurve.com, Ezzy. But it was one of the questions, our contract status and waiver exemption going to, he said veteran status and contract, which of course adds up also to waiver exemption. Will that factor in when you're making your decisions next year for this next year? And how will that play out? And really he seemed to indicate that, they're going to have to put the best six players forward. And so that could end up being Ville Heinola and Dylan Samberg, or that could end up being, Logan Stanley. I mean, I think the problem is folks come in with blinders on and they say like, hey, this is, this guy is ready to do this. This guy's ready to do this. Like I said, it's kind of like when I asked Murat about the Dom's article, the projection article. I mean, these projections all can't be right? There obviously has to be some element of mistake in them because it, otherwise.
Well, hello, Dave, Vegas Golden Knights.
Well,
right?
exactly.
Let's not forget the Golden Knights missed the playoffs last year. Like it's kind of crazy to think it because a lot of people had the Golden Knights, especially after they acquired Jack Eichel. But I'm talking about before the season started, like September 2021. Yeah. How many people were picking Vegas to win the division? It was almost a joke in the sense that it was like, oh, Vegas is by far the best team in the Pacific. Well, if you're asking me, I think the LA Kings right now are the best team in the Pacific. I'd probably put Edmonton and Calgary ahead of Vegas, right? Mainly because of the goaltending situation, right? Like you've got Robin Leonard and I believe Lauren Brossoit is also injured to start training camp, if I'm not mistaken. So
you are.
To me, that's a big issue here. Mark Stone, right? Good Winnipeg boy. I mean, one of the best two-way forwards in the league, but he's also got some lingering injury problems, right, Dave? So, I mean, Vegas is a perfect example. If I went back and looked last year, if we went back and looked, I'm sure he had Vegas at probably like 100 to 105 points, something like that, right? And they missed the playoffs. So further to your point, the model is always going to have a few cracks.
Well, and you know what, like I said, the interesting thing from last year, if you remember, was the first 20 games, no defenseman got injured. And it looked like you were never going to have any of these guys play a game because the Jets defense was intact through the first 20. And that's, somewhat unusual because of the nature of the game. And then sure enough, obviously between COVID and injury, you had young guys getting those opportunities, whether it was Dylan Samberg, Ville Heinola, Johnny Kovacevic, Declan Chisholm. I mean, guys got that chance. And it's interesting because this is it's not as if the Moose are going to be bereft of talent next year. There's a lot of young, prospects still in that system in the defensive element of the prospect pool. So you're not just leaving the Moose without, and absent those types of players. I just think it's going to be fascinating. I really do. I think that to me, the forward one is less interesting because I think, as you said, it almost seems like it's played out that we have that. We know what the top 12 is essentially going to look like, plus one or two others. And I think if you look at the defense, you could say, hey, I mean, let's put it this way. One thing we've learned about Rick Bowness in the last week or so of his media availabilities is when he says, we'll see. If he says, we'll see, it means he knows, but he's not going to tell us. So we'll have to see what Rick Bowness chooses to do in terms of his defense and how he rewards guys. Because as you said, it's going to be about what these guys do in the training camp games, what they do in training camp opportunities, whether it's the scrimmages or how they play, how they run the drills. But I've used, it's funny, the two words I used last week, and people were saying Dave Minuk for mayor. For the record, if I was mayor, all I would focus on is fixing our roads and making sure our streetlights were actually properly timed. That would be my mayoral platform because driving the city drives me crazy. But that aside,
a website that works when it's Leisure Guide Day would also be nice.
Yes, that would be my third element of my platform. But the balance and opportunity idea, right, of this lineup and how it's going to be, and I think that was a word that was used quite often by Rick Bowness. So I think it doesn't sound to me like and you can see it kind of in the sense that the Jets didn't bring in a ton. They don't have guys. I mean, obviously they don't have to bring guys in on PTOs on the back end because they have so many, but they don't have that element of there's no chance for Ville Heinola. There's no chance. I mean, I think he pumped the brakes a little bit yesterday in his media availability of Ville Heinola somewhat, but again, I don't think it's game over for Ville. I think he has an opportunity to assert himself to a degree that the coaching staff has no choice but to maintain him and stash Logan Stanley in the press box or, Dylan Samberg I just don't think anything is set in stone.
You only have so many D spots, and the writing is on the wall right now. And it goes back to what we said 10 minutes ago. We are big fans of Ville Heinola's game. Like, we all want to see him succeed in the NHL. I think most Jets fans are really excited about his game, but it's just he's not ready yet. I think it comes down to that. And they're like Morrissey and Dylan are going to be in your top 6. So yeah, if you want to dumb it down and simplify it, it is a battle between Heinola and Samberg and Logan Stanley. And in our opinions, and I think a lot of people's opinion, Murat as well. I mean, Dylan Samberg right now, it's Samberg's time, and it's going to be Heinola's time soon. If there are injuries, it might be this year. Going back to the forwards though, Dave, you mentioned Sam Gagner, who most likely will be a fourth line winger, might get some time on the third line. Like the thing to me that is really intriguing, that I know that we've talked about a little bit, is the chemistry in that top 6, because we know who the new face in the top 6 is. It's Cole Perfetti, right? And I think that line, playing Dubois centering that line, has the potential to be an extremely exciting line, right? And that's something that I'm really looking forward to watching in the preseason, along with seeing who really takes hold of those spots in the bottom 6. I mean, we expect the third line to be centered by Adam Lowry, and Mason Appleton most likely fits in on that third line, and Jansen Harkins most likely fits in on that third line. But there's other guys that want that spot too. Like Sam Gagner would love to get some more minutes and play on the third line. Murat mentioned Kevin Stenlund, Saku Manalainen. These guys want to play in the NHL. I mean, they might end up playing, in the AHL as well, right, Dave? But I mean, these guys are in the mix as well. So even though, the familiar faces of Scheifele, Connor, Ehlers, Dubois, Wheeler, all these guys, they're going to be in the top 6. I mean, there's a lot of other intriguing elements to preseason. How do Perfetti and Dubois, mesh together on that second line? How does Jansen Harkins establish himself, on that third line? Because he's kind of jumped around from the third line, fourth line, everything like that. So I think even though you could basically, with a lot of confidence, pencil in who the Jets, top 12 is going to be. Dominic Toninato is a guy that is obviously, or I shouldn't say obviously, but should be a staple of that fourth line.
Yeah.
It's kind of like, what the puzzle pieces are. You just have to, figure out where those puzzle pieces go.
Yeah. And I mean, we can get into the forwards after. We'll take a break right up now, and then we'll jump back into talking about the forwards, because I don't think it's as clear cut as folks think. I think that there is, again, I'm going to use that word, opportunity, and I think one of the things that we'll have to see if Rick Bowness chooses to do is more balance within his roster and more balance in his lineup. So let's head to our Ezzy, half the show like that, just done. So we're going to switch to a quick commercial break. Thanks for our sponsors, and we'll come back with some more Illegal Curve Hockey Show with Ezra Ginsburg, Dave Minuk.
Keeping Winnipeg laughing for over 30 years. Rumors, Canada's longest running comedy club, bringing you the biggest laughs from the best comedians on the planet. Jerry Seinfeld, Chris Rock, Jon Stewart, Dennis Miller, Brad Garrett, the greats, and all the up-and-comers too. When was the last time you laughed out loud? Make it a great night out with friends, or book your office or birthday party. Even a fundraising event at Rumors. Get all the details and dates on upcoming shows at rumorscomedyclub.com.
Hi, Ez. A strange question for you. But why are you lying on the ground being crushed by a piano?
Well, Drew, I definitely tried to carry this baby grand piano down the stairs by myself, and somehow I failed miserably.
Right. Yeah, sorry, that was a silly question on my part. My apologies. Would you like me to call Rolly's Transfer Moving and Storage to help you move the piano? They are the most experienced piano moving company in Winnipeg, after all.
Yes, please call Rollies and hurry. This piano is very, very heavy.
Rolly's Transfer Moving and Storage offers stress-free residential moving services while taking great care of your personal belongings, including your piano. At Rolly's, no job is too big or too small. For more information, visit rollys.com.
Hi, it's Drew from Illegal Curve here. Selling your home can be stressful, but it wasn't for me. Thanks to my friends at Zappia Group Realty, they made the process so easy. My home sold within 48 hours and with multiple offers. Zappia Group Realty took care of everything with their exquisite customer service and attention to detail. If you want to sell your home for more in less time, get started by talking to Frank and Mauro Zappia of Zappia Group Realty. Online at zappiagroup.com.
Hey, Drew.
Ezzy, whoa, what a smile!
Yeah, I got my crowns done at Linden Market Dental Center, and they whiten my teeth.
I see.
They're so bright that every time I smile, they go...
We have hockey tonight. Do you have a mouth guard to protect those pearly whites?
I sure do.
Whoa, they even ting through the mouth guard.
Linden Market Dental Center covers all your dental needs from restorative to cosmetic dentistry and will fit you with a sports guard for that active lifestyle. 877 Waverly, see lindenmarketdental.com.
So you're a pizza person, you married a wing person, but somehow your kids are salad people. You can't pick your fam, but you can pick your BP meal deal, starting from $18.99 for takeout or delivery at bostonpizza.com.
Welcome back to the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. I am your host, Dave Minuk, joined by my boy, Ezzy Ginsburg. And, as before the break, we were talking about the Jets forward groups. And one of the things we talked about during the commercial, of course, was, you have this team, this Jets team, and Rick Bowness has talked about how he wants them to play and the systems they want to employ. Do you have the horses to do that? It's one thing to say, well, I want my quarter horse to run like a thoroughbred, but can it? Is it most likely to be able to do that? Will it be able to have the sustainability, use some thoroughbred racing terms, in order to do what you're trying to get it to do, right? It's very hard for a quarter horse to suddenly become a thoroughbred and start riding, running longer races.
I have no idea what you're talking about, but I'll definitely be watching Seabiscuit tonight.
So the question I have for you is, because there has been a lot of talk about changing the systems, and I'm not going to ask you to break down the system here. We don't have a whiteboard behind you, and I don't want you to start drawing on my wall because that's probably your next order of business. But, do the Jets have the capability of playing that type of system? Like, can the team get a buy-in from these guys in order to adapt to the system that Rick Bowness is playing or wanting them to play?
Yeah, they do. And these guys are professionals. And we all know that, the Jets group of skilled forwards are not Ryan O'Reilly and, Mark Stone and Alexander Barkov. Like, the premier defensive forwards is where I'm going with this, right? The Jets have let's call it offensive first, kind of top six, right? Like, not saying that these guys can't play defense, but whether you're talking about Scheifele, whether you're talking about Connor, Wheeler, I mean, these guys, their defensive metrics over the last few years have not been great, right? But that doesn't mean you can't get better, and that doesn't mean they can't change the way they play. Like, we were talking about it, during the break, the forecheck and, talking about, how you want to play, with speed and everything like that. Like, to me, the Jets have to be more of an attack first type of team. Like, and if you look at Rick Bowness's work in Dallas, but even, some of the systems that you saw in whether it was when he was an assistant with Tampa Bay or Vancouver, like, a lot of people, I think a lot of Jets fans specifically I've seen on social media are kind of worried that, you're going to see, exactly the way the Dallas Stars played. I don't think it kind of works like that. Like, I don't necessarily think a coach comes in and says, I'm going to do exactly what I did. I think it'll be a variation of what he did in Dallas. And you're starting to see a little bit. Murat broke it down in his column for The Athletic about the forecheck and how the Jets want to be more aggressive. And I think that's what you saw back in 2017, 18, 19. You saw much more of a puck pressure type of pursuit, right? As opposed to, the sitting back and, waiting for turnovers and everything like that. But it's everything, Dave. It's the way you play in the offensive zone, the neutral zone, and the defensive zone. And Rick Bowness talked about that. And I think that's why the emphasis was on, we're going to start off with the neutral zone, then we're going to go to the D zone, we're going to work on the offensive zone. There are only so many. You think about the training camp, and once you get going into the games, the practices start to dry up a little bit. So he's really got to take advantage of these first 3 days of training camp. And obviously, as training camp proceeds into week 2 and week 3. But to get back to your question, yeah, I do think, the Jets do have the ability to be a better defensive team and adapt to a new system and not just adapt to it, but, execute in that new system. I just think, and you heard it from the players themselves. Last year, I think at certain points in the season, or for the majority of the season, they didn't really know what they were supposed to be doing. They knew they were supposed to be going out there and scoring more goals than the opposition, but they didn't really know, what the team structure and what they should be trying to accomplish in all 3 zones, right? So I think right off the bat in the first couple of days of training camp, it's been clear that the Jets want to be a much more organized team in all the zones, not just the defensive zone. Hockey is not played in one zone, as you know, Dave. So, you got to know what you're doing, whether you're on the defensive side of the puck or the offensive side of the puck. And so I think that this Jets team, forget all the cliches and breaking down all the complex systems. This has got to be a team that plays better defensively as a team. And then when that happens, that turns into offense. I think too much of the time last year, the Jets were relying on the power play. Too much of the time they were relying on, their top players like Kyle Connor and Nick Ehlers to score goals. I think when Ehlers was out for 19 or 20 games, you really saw how the Jets, lacked an offensive play driver in their top 6. I think Cole Perfetti is going to help with that, even though he's young. I think Cole Perfetti is going to, bring some dynamicism. I know you like that word, Dave, to the Jets offense. I think, Blake Wheeler is you're going to get exactly what you've got out of Blake Wheeler the last 11 years. He's going to be near a point per game. He's going to be a guy that plays, whether it's on the first or power play, second power play. I mean, he's going to give you his all. But really, the buy-in, even though we can talk about, whether the Jets will buy in or not, the results are going to, show themselves very early on. We talked about, the Jets starting with the Rangers with the season opener. The Jets have a pretty tough schedule to start off. So, I mean, like the proof is going to be in the pudding right in the beginning, and we're going to see it in the preseason, although the preseason is tough to really take too much from because you're seeing so many guys playing in games, especially early on, that are not going to be with the big club once October 14th rolls around. So, yeah, I mean, especially on defense, this is a veteran group when you're talking about Morrissey, Schmidt, Pionk, Brendan Dillon. Murat mentioned this. I think Brendan Dillon is going to have a better year. And I do have faith in Brendan Dillon that he can be a solid, left side top 4 guy. So, I mean, everything, there's so many factors at play here, Dave. It's the forwards, it's the defense. They need better goaltending out of Connor Hellebuck. Is he going to have to steal a lot of games for the Jets to make the playoffs? Yeah, he is. But you know what? A lot of teams have guys that can do that. Look at the Rangers with Igor Shesterkin. What was the big criticism of the Rangers in the playoffs was that they were too reliant on Shesterkin's, excellent goaltending. Well, what are they going to say? Tell Shesterkin to stop stopping the puck so much? Obviously not. They want elite level goaltending out of Connor Hellebuck. So it's not just whether or not the Jets buy into Rick Bowness' system, and they aren't going to have a choice if they don't buy in early. With the tough regular season schedule that they have right off the bat. I mean, they're going to find themselves behind the 8 ball, right? So, I mean, I think these guys are refreshed. I think the new coaching staff has already had a big impact on them. And I do think that these guys do, want to be better defensively, and they want to learn and show that last year was a blip, and they want to get back into the playoffs. So, but again, it's all speculation at this point. I mean, the players on the ice, Craig Button said this on TSN, right? Like, you can talk about systems all you want, but it's the players that, execute it. And ultimately those are the ones that, are going to determine how successful or unsuccessful they are.
But and as I, building on your thoughts, I really think it's interesting to hear, and it's somewhat of an intangible, but to hear the excitement in the voice. And, Mark Scheifele may have used that word 55 times, as Scotty Billick of the Winnipeg Sun said the other day, when doing his media availability. But I mean, I don't know. It seemed like a refreshed Mark Scheifele, and you could say, whatever, it's lip service, and he's just everybody sounds like that. I don't know. Like, I mean, I've heard a lot of Mark Scheifele interviews, and he sounded different. He sounded just more excited about the prospects. And whether you listen to him on 32 Thoughts or whether you listen to him on any other, I mean, it's always interesting, right? Like Blake Wheeler did that Raw Knuckles podcast with Chris Nyland and former Winnipeg Jets 2.0 Tim Stapleton, which we've
Bruce Reed.
Exactly, which we've gone on a little site called legalcurve.com. Tim actually dropped a Booty Shakes Monday reference, which was pretty funny. I will give Blake Wheeler credit. He did drop a pretty hilarious story about how he was in Atlanta a few years after the Thrashers had left, and he was driving a car back to Florida, and he was with a buddy of his, and they tried to get in. I think it was like a Mayweather fight or something like that. And the guy's like, "Come on, you used to play for the Thrashers. Tell the bouncer." And apparently, like, Blake Wheeler walked up to the bouncer and like tried to drop the whole. I was with the Thrashers. I play in the NHL, and the guy, apparently people heard this and were making fun of him, like, "Hey, this guy used to play for the Thrashers." And then, of course, the best part about the story was he didn't actually get into the. He didn't get into the club. They basically made him wait in line because the Thrashers, of course, were not exactly no bueno in Atlanta.
I think 95% of the Atlanta metro area had no idea that the Thrashers even existed when they were there.
Yeah. Although there are still some great Atlanta Thrashers fans who follow along with the Winnipeg Jets, and I appreciate whenever we get.
That's why I said 95%.
No.
I said there's 5% of Atlanta, right, supported the Thrashers. But
that would still be 5. By the way, 5% of Atlanta would still probably be the population of Winnipeg, so it's still a pretty big number.
A-Town is a big city.
Yeah. So, anyways, but getting back to Mark Scheifele and Pierre-Luc Dubois, it's funny because people asked about the contract with Pierre-Luc Dubois. Not a surprise there, and he gave his, I just want to think in 1-year terms, which is, of course, his right to say. But that aside, I really did think that there was a lot of a different tone. And I think that, look, you change the whole coaching staff. There's nothing else to change except for the players. And I think what Rick Bowness has come in and done, and he's put his stamp on this team. He has basically said, there's no nonsense. And there's a reason why guys love him as a coach, right? And I'm sure that Mark Scheifele talked to Tyler Seguin through a game of, rock, paper, scissors. And said, hey, like give me the 4-1-1. And it sounds like I said, that everybody just loves this guy as a coach. Now, being the nicest guy ever isn't going to do you a lot of good if you're not getting the results on the ice. But I think the team knows they have to be bought in and they have to be dialed in. And I just think that it just seems like there's a lot, and I haven't gone back and listened to last year's media availabilities to hear if that, quote, same level of excitement that you hear was there. But I'm just saying it just feels, being in the, around the Iceplex, it just feels like there's a different sort of optimism than there would be normally.
Right. And there's reasons to be optimistic, Dave, beyond, the new coaching staff, right? Like you talk about Mark Scheifele, and he has so many different reasons to be motivated. I mean, namely the fact that last year was arguably, one of his most disappointing years as a Jet, not offensively, but just overall years. Clearly, Scheifele did not like playing under Dave Lowry, Dave. Like, let's call a spade a spade. Like, Scheifele was downright miserable under Dave Lowry, and the results spoke for themselves, right? But whether you're talking about Pierre-Luc Dubois, who has 2 years or 1 year left on his contract, but I should say 2 years left before he can become a UFA, whether you're talking about Blake Wheeler, who's got 2 years left on his deal, there's a lot of reasons for you to be optimistic that those players are going to be motivated to have big years, right? And we don't know what the future holds, right? Like, could Wheeler be traded this year or next year? Yeah, he could. Same thing goes for Pierre-Luc Dubois. Mark Scheifele less so. I don't think, there's any reason to think that, Scheifele will be moved. But when you're talking about Dubois and Wheeler, let's be honest here. Both of those guys could have been moved in the offseason based on, what we were hearing from Frank Saravalli and Elliot Friedman and the insiders, right? So, you can go up and down the roster. Like, Cole Perfetti is a guy that I think we need to talk about a lot. And he's a guy that, it's really unfortunate that Perfetti had the injury problems, because he was really starting to come into his own, even though, he's only 20 years old. So I think that, we talked about, that Dubois, Wheeler, Perfetti line. I think that's a really fascinating line, and it might not stick together, Dave. I mean, right. Connor Scheifele, Ehlers is the line right now in training camp. One thing is certain. I mean, Scheifele, Connor, and Ehlers are your three best players. So, and we know Rick Bowness likes to put his three best players, together, right? Please see Jamie Benn, Tyler Seguin, Alex Radulov from a few years back, right? And then obviously, Jason Robertson, Rupe Hintz, guys like this, they started to establish themselves in the top six and everything like that. But I mean, I think there's reasons to be optimistic about the Jet. Connor Hellebuyck, another guy who is coming off of a bounce back here. Like, when you talk about, Dom Lucian in the Athletic projecting the Jets at 88 points, it's possible that he's 100% right. But essentially, if you want to, kind of just simplify it, the Jets are looking for 10 more points, right? The Jets are looking to be a playoff team. I don't think anybody's expecting 110 points out of the Jets. Maybe they surprise us and they are a 100 to 110 point team. But if you think about it, you're looking to be, in the high 90s, because it's probably going to take 96, 97 points. I haven't looked at Dom's model, but somewhere around 96 or 97 points to probably make it in that Central Division, right? The Pacific Division's only gotten better. So it's not a guarantee you have 5 teams from the Central making it. Most likely it's going to be 4. So you have to beat out one of Dallas or Minnesota or Nashville, in my opinion, to make the playoffs. So, I think, right now everything is, everything is looking fresh and, there's a lot of reasons to be optimistic, but I do think that it's more than just the coaching staff. I think there's every reason to believe you're going to get, a bounce back performance from, I mentioned Neil Pionk earlier. We know it's been well documented, the injuries he was dealing with last year, right? You're going to get a bounce back season. I think Connor Hellebuyck's going to be better. I do think Scheifele is going to be better defensively. And again, I caution, with what I'm saying here, I don't think Scheifele is going to turn into Ryan O'Reilly or Guy Carbonneau, to use an old school Montreal Canadian, old school Dallas Star. Like, he's not going to turn into a Selke winner. Right. I do think Scheifele is going to have a better overall year. That's my own personal opinion. I think he's motivated. I think, I mentioned it earlier. I think he was just miserable towards the end of last year. I don't think he was enjoying hockey as much as you've seen in years past. So I think he's going to be better. Kyle Connor, we know he's going to put in 45 to 50 goals, maybe even more. And I think you're going to really, I think Jets fans are going to really like what they see out of Dylan Sandberg this year. We saw it a little bit last year in 15 games. but I think Dylan Sandberg's, ready to really establish himself in the Jets top 6, as opposed to just kind of coming up and filling in for an injured defenseman, right, Dave? So,
right.
Again, like, who knows? The Jets, I feel like Marat said in the first, half an hour of the show, could the Jets, be a playoff team and be that team that surprises a lot of people? Absolutely. I do think that they can make the playoffs, but a lot of things have to go right. A lot of things went wrong last year.
Mm-hmm.
So I think the Jets are probably the 3rd or 4th best team in the Central, and hopefully that's enough to get them, into the playoffs. But it's going to be a much different year this year. There's, I hate to keep saying it, but the Jets are going to have to, the start for this season is going to be maybe more important than in previous years, not just because of the strength of schedule, but because of the way, last year went. I think the Jets want to really, start off, the first, let's say 5 to 10 games and really, get their season off on the right foot. So, nobody knows right now what this team is, but I just don't think they're going to be as bad as they were this year. I just don't see that being possible, even though they're running it back, with the same group of players.
Mm-hmm.
I don't see the Jets losing as many games to bad teams last year, for example, right? I just don't see it. I think this team knows that, the current core of this team is going to be much different a couple years from now. So I think there is a sense of urgency from these guys.
And I look, I would just add, Ezzy, that I think a guy like Cole Perfetti, you're right. You're 100% right. He's 20 years old. But one thing with Cole that we saw in the AHL was his adaptability. He's not the fastest guy by any stretch. He's gotten a little bit better, but the point is he's cerebral up the wazoo. I mean, the guy can think the game, and he knows what he wants to do. But, in the AHL, his points to start, the jump from junior to pro hockey is massive. I don't care what anybody says. It is a massive leap forward, as good as the WHL or OHL or QMJHL are. They're not pro hockey. And so the reality is you jump up to playing with men who are fully grown and ready to pulverize you. That's a different sort of animal. And a lot of his points to start with the Manitoba Moose were peripheral. He was always from the outside. He never went to the middle. And then as he started to get more comfortable and he started to analyze the pro game, you saw his game change. And all of a sudden I remember I was at the Iceplex and I was watching, and as you know, I was one of the only people watching live because it was closed to everybody.
Well, you were one of the only people that was actually allowed in there.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Like, there was nobody else in the building, but it was interesting because he cut towards, it's so crystal clear, cut right towards the front of the net, regardless of who was there, scored a beautiful goal. But the point was he changed his game. He adapted his game. And I think that you'll slowly see that, especially if he's playing up on that, top 1 or 2. I don't really care about the distinction as to who's the first line, who's the second line. But I think that if he can stay healthy, then I think that he can be a bit of an X factor for the Jets. Look, am I going to say he's going to have 100 points next year? No, I'm not saying that at all. But I'm just saying I think he's such a good facilitator that the other guys who are playing with him and whomever that may be will only benefit because he is such a good passer and he can get guys the puck in space to facilitate guys like Kyle Connor to score goals, Pierre-Luc Dubois to score goals, Mark Scheifele to score goals, Nikolai Ehlers. I don't care who it is. He could be that kind of that X factor for the Jets that they did. I know they had Paul Stastny and he was adaptable, and I know they had Andrew Kopp, who was adaptable again and was able to fulfill a role. But I mean, Cole Perfetti's offensive abilities is better than both of theirs, quite frankly. He's not the veteran player that they are. He doesn't have the veteran savvy that they do, but offensively, he is better than those guys. And I think that, or his offensive upside, I should say, is better. And I think that if he can achieve that, if he can realize that, that is kind of that X factor. And the other one I would add in there quickly is the third line. I think the reality is you need more production. You cannot be a third line that's a checking line. That is an outdated, outmodeled, it doesn't work anymore. You don't have.
It needs to be a shutdown line. The word shutdown line needs to be used a little bit more. Checking is you're right. It's different because as we've talked about, you have to have 3 scoring lines. I mean, ideally you want 4 scoring lines. But the point is that you want, production from outside of your top 6. And that's the point that you're trying to make here, Dave. And, even though right now you look at Lowry, Appleton, Harkins, and you'd say, well, you're not going to get a lot of offense from those guys. Mm-hmm. I mean, let's just pump the brakes a little bit. First off, I mean, it's not a guarantee that that's going to be the line.
Right.
You could have a guy like Sam Gagner on that line. You could have a guy like Morgan Barron on that line. That's to me what is so interesting and why I said, the puzzle pieces, you just need to figure out where the puzzle pieces go. Right. And that's what Rick Bowness and his coaching staff are doing right now. And I don't think it's a guarantee, by the way, that, it's going to be Perfetti, Dubois, Wheeler. I mean, these are just the lines in training camp. They could easily be the lines opening night, Dave. But as you know, Kyle Connor and Pierre-Luc Dubois had a lot of nice chemistry together. And I'm just saying this, and I might be wrong. We might not see them a lot together, but I wouldn't be surprised if, Rick Bowness, turns to Kyle Connor and Pierre-Luc Dubois, and then you maybe see, Blake Wheeler on that line, for example. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if, you see a line of Perfetti, Scheifele, and Ehlers. I think the Scheifele-Perfetti, combination is something that I would really like to see for an extended period. And that goes back to what we were talking about. Everything is new right now. Nothing is established. Rick Bowness mentioned this himself. The Jets missed the playoffs last year. Everything is on the table. So let's take the first couple games, first couple days of training camp with a grain of salt. And I know a lot of you Jets fans do. I mean, nobody is writing anything in stone right now. But there's only a few things. I mean, aside from who the guys up the middle are going to be, I think the wingers, like you could see a bunch of different combinations. I don't think you're going to see Morgan Barron on the top line. But if you're looking for a little bit more offense on that third line, Dave, I think Morgan Barron is your guy.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I think obviously, he hasn't been playing because he's been dealing with some sort of injury, but the reality in training camp, I should say, but the truth is, I think he is an absolute. I mean, he was the best, most consistent player, 4 goals in 4 straight games for the Manitoba Moose in the playoffs when we know scoring is a little more difficult. Hey, the Moose know scoring was more difficult. They took about 75 shots in 2 games and still only scored like 1 goal. So they know that scoring is at a premium in the playoffs. He stepped up when it was necessary, and his game is like that. I thought he really acquitted himself well, and he provided himself a good springboard for that next level. And look, there's a lot of guys like that. David Gustafsson seems nobody's talking about him. Sacramento Nalainen, Kevin Stenlund. Like, there's guys who could be interesting pieces, and that's why I said, like, it's we're always so quick to stamp this and say this is going to be the result. It's like, well, then what the hell is the point of playing if this is going to be the result?
The coaches themselves, Rick Bowness. It goes back to what I said. They themselves do not know, what the lines are going to look like. I think they have an idea of what they would like to see and what players they're favoring, but they don't know. They're just figuring it out themselves. And Rick Bowness said as much. So, I mean, that's why you play those games in the preseason, even though some of them are terrible. That's where you see these guys in action. Right. So you're right. I mean, David Gustafsson could be a winger on the third line. Sam Gagner, could be on the third line. You say whatever you want about Sam Gagner. This is a really good professional player, even though he's a little bit older. I mean, this is a guy who Oilers fans, for example, loved when he was playing in the bottom 6 for the Oilers a few years back, right? This is a guy who played penalty kill and provide some offense. He had 31 points. I'm not saying he's going to duplicate that because he got a lot of opportunity in Detroit, but yeah, I mean, they do have some options here. And even though the Jets aren't as deep as a lot of other teams, I think, there's a lot of potential there when you're talking about guys like, Morgan Barron, for example, and David Gustafsson. So still very early on in training camp, and we there's a lot to be sorted out. But that's what's exciting that's why it's exciting to cover the Jets and be a hockey fan, right? Like you want unknown. If everything was already established and we already knew exactly who was going to be in the Jets opening night roster, why would we even cover training camp or follow it, right, Dave? So
that's right. Well, we want people to follow Ezzy and go to illegalcurve.com for all your latest Jets content. We're going to head to a break. While you're taking a break and while you're listening to our lovely sponsors, make sure you smash that like button, hit a like, because we appreciate that. Helps
smash
us that little thing called that algorithm. So
I mean, all it takes is a second just to go down to that little thumbs up.
Yeah, give it a thumbs up.
Click that like button. I want to see 100 more likes in the next 5 minutes. Let's do it, boys.
That's a tall tale, and girls.
And girls. Yeah. We have women that watch.
Of course. So let's head to break right now on the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. When we come back, Marty Biron, former NHL goaltender, is going to join us to talk about the Sabres and the NHL in general.
Keeping Winnipeg laughing for over 30 years. Rumors, Canada's longest running comedy club, bringing you the biggest laughs from the best comedians on the planet. Jerry Seinfeld, Chris Rock, Jon Stewart, Dennis Miller, Brad Garrett, the greats, and all the up-and-comers too. When was the last time you laughed out loud? Make it a great night out with friends or book your office or birthday party. Even a fundraising event at Rumors. Get all the details and dates on upcoming shows at rumorscomedyclub.com.
Hi, Ez. A strange question for you. But why are you lying on the ground being crushed by a piano?
Well, Drew, I definitely tried to carry this baby grand piano down the stairs by myself, and somehow I failed miserably.
Right. Yeah, sorry. That was a silly question on my part. My apologies. Would you like me to call Rolly's Transfer Moving and Storage to help you move the piano? They are the most experienced piano moving company in Winnipeg, after all.
Yes, please call Rollies and hurry. This piano is very, very heavy.
Rolly's Transfer Moving and Storage offers stress-free residential moving services while taking great care of your personal belongings, including your piano. At Rolly's, no job is too big or too small. For more information, visit rollies.com.
Hi, it's Drew from Illegal Curve here. Selling your home can be stressful, but it wasn't for me. Thanks to my friends at Zappia Group Realty, they made the process so easy. My home sold within 48 hours and with multiple offers. Zappia Group Realty took care of everything with their exquisite customer service and attention to detail. If you want to sell your home for more in less time, get started by talking to Frank and Mauro Zappia of Zappia Group Realty. Online at zappiagroup.com.
Hey, Drew.
Ezzy, whoa, what a smile!
Yeah, I got my crowns done at Linden Market Dental Center, and they whiten my teeth.
I see.
They're so bright that every time I smile, they go...
We have hockey tonight. Do you have a mouth guard to protect those pearly whites?
I sure do.
Whoa, they even ting through the mouth guard.
Linden Market Dental Center covers all your dental needs from restorative to cosmetic dentistry and will fit you with a sports guard for that active lifestyle. 877 Waverly. See lindenmarketdental.com.
So you're a pizza person, you married a wing person, but somehow your kids are salad people. You can't pick your fam, but you can pick your BP meal deal, starting from $18.99 for takeout or delivery at bostonpizza.com.
Welcome back to the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. I am Dave Minuk with Ezra Ginsburg, and we're going to be joined by one of our favorite guests. We're heading out east to bring in Marty Biron. Marty, how's it going? How are you doing this Saturday morning?
I'm doing good. I am in a parking ramp at the Lecom Harbor Center in Buffalo. The Sabres just had a blue versus gold scrimmage. So full-time, camp hockey is going. It's fun.
Well, Marty, one of the players we have to start this interview with, because we've covered him, I've covered him in the AHL as much as I've covered anybody, is Eric Comrie. He's getting a huge opportunity in Buffalo to be, it seems like it's going to be a platoon for Eric this year. So what have you seen so far, and what can you tell us about the former Jets prospect?
Well, this was my first look at Eric Comrie in camp so far. They had a couple of ice sessions, just practices, but they had the scrimmage today. He looked really good. Look, I got to meet him in person for the first time last Monday at the Sabres golf tournament. We chatted for a good 20 minutes while we were in a rain delay, which was awesome. Great guy. I love how he thinks the game. He's a student of the game, a little bit of a hockey dork, as I am and was forever. So I was excited to see him today. Again, he's strong structural goaltender. Positioning is always good. Not the biggest of goaltenders, but I think he's going to be really good for the Sabres. And this, in my opinion, is going to be a really good season for him.
Yeah, and it doesn't surprise us hearing that, Marty, because we were there when he was drafted in 2013 in New Jersey, and we've been lucky enough to have him on the Legal Curve Hockey Show a bunch of times. And not only is he a great goaltender coming off of his best year in the NHL, I mean, he's just a great human being. Like, nobody will have anything bad to say about Eric Comrie. He was a fan favorite. And even though, Jets fans are, upset that he's not going to be playing for the Jets next year, I think a lot of Jets fans are happy that he's going to get the opportunity to play more games in Buffalo. And just sticking with the Sabres, because not only, we're at Sabres practice and you're rocking the nice Sabres jacket there. We want to get to some other teams as well, but like nobody knows the Sabres better than you. And there's, to me, it seems like there's more optimism. That's what we wanted to ask you about with the Sabres, because there's no doubt that there's been some disappointing years with Buffalo, but Kevin Adams just received the new contract extension. Yeah. Obviously Owen Power, I mean, sky's the limit for him. A lot of people are already talking about, the Calder Trophy race with, him and, Matty Beniers and, Mason McTavish, some of the other top defensemen. Jack Quinn had a monster year, as with the Rochester Americans last year. Jeff Skinner just had a bounce back year, 33 goals. Yeah. Tage Thompson, like I could go on and on and on, right, Marty? But I mean, whether or not the Sabres make the playoffs, is there not a huge optimism in Buffalo amongst Sabres fans that, this team is on the verge of turning the corner and getting back to being a perennial playoff team?
Yeah, there's a big buzz going around with the fan base. Obviously, it's training camp. So you look around all 32 teams right now, people are excited about seeing their team on the ice. But I've gone through this now with the Buffalo Sabres over the last few years, and this year definitely feels different. We had a big fan fest last weekend. It was packed. The players were involved into doing some kids press conference, doing some stations with shooting, and there was even a goaltending station. So I believe that this team now is connecting with the fans. It's showing in the community, but it's also showing on the ice. Now they have to get a better than 20 points increase to hope to make the playoffs. They had 75 points last year. They want to get above 95 to maybe get a chance at the playoffs. Is that a little too much to ask? Probably, but they could get to 85 to 90 points. I think it would be a really good step forward. And who knows, with Comrie and net, maybe you found a goaltender for the next couple of years. You talk about Jack Quinn, who is a standout with the 67s in the OHL and also with Rochester in the American League. JJ Peterka could also find himself on this roster. Matt Savoy, you guys know Matt Savoy in Winnipeg, right? He's first round pick of the Sabres, 9th overall. He looked really good this morning. He has speed. He has the skill set. So who knows? Maybe he starts the season in Buffalo. I think it's going to be a numbers game, though. They've got a lot of players on the roster. And you talked about Kevin Adams. He's the first Sabres GM to get a second contract since Darcy Regier. I mean, we look back to Darcy Regier, and that was between 97 and 2011 or 12 or whatever it was. He was there for a long time. He and Lindy Ruff was the coach. But since that regime, not one GM has had a second contract until now with Kevin Adams.
Well, that doesn't say a lot for job security in Buffalo, but it's it's probably a good sign for Kevin Adams.
Lack of success. Lack of success.
But you know what?
Things, right?
But I was going to say, and that's not a bad thing. If you're not having success, being GM for life is not necessarily an appropriate reward. But there's so many, and as he went through it, there's so many players. One player who I've always had my eye on is Victor Olofsson. And how important is he going to be for this Sabres team that in order to take that next step? 20 goals, I think 29 assists last year for Buffalo in 72 games. But he just seems to be a player that I think can help that Sabres team take that next step, don't you?
Yeah, well, there's two ways Victor is going to help the Sabres team to take that next step. One, he's a goal scorer. So if he goes out and scores a lot of goals, last year he had an arm injury, did not shoot the puck the way we know he can shoot the puck in the first half of the season. He lost his confidence also in that middle part of the season because he couldn't really shoot and release the puck the way he wanted to. Had a much stronger second half, especially in the last 2 months of the season. So if he keeps it up that way, great. If he gets to 30, 35 goals, he can do that, especially on the power play. It will help. But there's a second way maybe Victor Olofsson would help the Sabres, is there's still great value attached to Victor Olofsson. There's still great value attached to Casey Middlestat. There's still great value attached to a lot of players that are still on the line. Like, are they going to be part of your core group moving forward or not? Because there are players, as we mentioned, Savoy, Quinn, Peterka, Yuri Kulik. There's a lot of players that are fighting, and they have a lot of skills. So maybe Victor Olofsson scores goals and helps the Sabres winning games, or maybe it's via a trade that Victor Olofsson will help bring in some asset to continue this momentum that the Sabres are on right now. So I hope it's Victor scoring goals, but you never know. It could be the other one.
Marty, just getting away from the Sabres, but not getting too far away from the Sabres, both literally and figuratively. I wanted to ask you about Matt Murray and Ilya Samsonov in Toronto, because I mean, we all know that, Matt Murray, since, he's won the Stanley Cups, he's had a lot of injuries, and it didn't work out for him in Ottawa. And obviously Ilya Samsonov, we all thought was, going to, at least I did. I imagine you did as well, thought, he was going to stick around and factor in Washington. Obviously they went, in a different direction there, but how do you see the goaltending playing out in Toronto? Like, is it going to come down to ultimately who plays better? Like, do you think Matt Murray can turn it around in Toronto? Because I mean, even though, it's not like he's signed to a long-term contract or anything. I mean, Kyle Dubas, who obviously has the prior relationship with Matt Murray, I mean, he brought him in, for a reason to win them hockey games. Like, do you see that kind of being a 1A, 1B situation? Like, how do you see the goaltending? I know I'm asking you a lot of questions here, but how do you see it playing out in Toronto? Because that's what everybody's talking about, after the first couple of days of training camp in Toronto.
Well, there's a lot to unpack with the goaltending situation in Toronto. That's why there's a lot of questions. So I feel like Toronto over the last 3 seasons have gone backwards in their goalie department. It went from Freddie Anderson and Jack Campbell to Jack Campbell, Peter Mrazek. So I thought that was a step backwards. And now this year with Matt Murray, Ilya Samsonov, that's another step backward. Now I understand the situation, right? Like where the Leafs were not totally happy with Freddie Anderson. He was hurt, didn't play in the playoffs. And last year you have Jack Campbell, who's hurt, wasn't able to really go to the level he wanted to towards the end of the season. So you're moving in a different direction. I get it. But you also have to look at the background around Matt Murray and Ilya Samsonov. I thought Matt Murray played his best seasons when he had Marc-Andre Fleury as a safety net, right? In Pittsburgh, winning back-to-back cup. But you have Marc-Andre Fleury right there as your backup. You're playing with house money. If you don't play well, Murray is going to, Fleury's going to go in and pick you up. And Murray had that free attitude, could play. Now there's pressure on him. There's pressure on him in Ottawa, and there's a lot of pressure on him in Toronto. I think this is a bit of a problem. And Samsonov was a very, very good prospect for the Washington Capitals, so much so that Washington thought, well, hey, we can move on from Brayden Holtby. We have a guy like Samsonov. Well, that was also when Mitch Korn was the goalie coach in Washington. Barry Trotz was the coach in Washington. They go away from that group. These guys go to Long Island, and Samsonov seems to have dropped in his game and in the way that he plays since the change. So could that turn around for both of them? Absolutely, it could. I see Matt Murray as a goaltender that will be more consistent, but it will be consistently average at best, right? So that's how I see it. Samsonov has a higher ceiling, but it's, the roller coaster, a great game and then a bad, like that could give the Leafs, Kyle Dubas, Sheldon Keefe, Brendan Shanahan, a bit of a heart attack on certain days. So, I was on the Toronto radio this week and I said the exact same thing, and my Twitter notifications and messages were just out of this world. People are so sensitive in Toronto, but that's the way I see it. I don't think Toronto was focusing on saying, hey, we need playoff goaltending right now. I think the Leafs are saying, we're a good team. We'll be in the playoffs. Let's start with this. And then at the trade deadline, if we need to bring somebody in, let's do it then. They didn't want to worry about it right now. And the options weren't really there.
We're joined on the Illegal Curve Hockey Show by Marty Biron, of course, the former NHL goaltender who covers the Sabres like no other. Marty, looking here in Winnipeg, they didn't change the team. They're running it back, which is causing some consternation amongst the fan base. But yet this team is the one that everyone thought was a Stanley Cup contender last year, largely. They bring in Rick Bowness. They bring in a whole new coaching staff. So from the outside, what are your thoughts about what they're, doing here in Winnipeg? And do you have any sort of familiarity with Rick Bowness during your time in the league?
I've crossed paths, not on the same teams with Rick Bowness, right, but he's coached against me many times. So I've had a few conversations with him, leaving the rink or, on the off days or whatnot. I think Rick Bowness is one of the best hockey people around. Nice guy, knows a lot, has a lot of knowledge. But is that going to translate to what the Jets want eventually to do, is to win games, compete, go in the playoffs, go far in the playoffs, win a Stanley Cup? I don't know. Look, I was emotionally attached to the Jets for the last few years. I loved them. I loved their makeup. I was a big Paul Maurice fan. I like this team. I love Connor Hellebuck. This team has all the tools. Like, I put them on my, playoffs, like going far team every single year. So this year, I'm detaching myself emotionally from the Winnipeg Jets, unfortunately, for all Jets fans. And I am not expecting a whole lot. I'll be honest with you. I think this team may have some really, really deep-rooted issues that it's going to take a lot longer than a half a season or a season to figure it out. Do they have players that I love? Absolutely. Cal Connor, wow, what a player. Nick Hiller, what a player. Connor Hellebuck, what a player. Scheifele, Wheeler, like, they're all really, really standout players. But I don't think they've been able to put it all together. I think it's going to be a really tough challenge for Rick Bowness and that whole staff to get it done in 1 year. It may take longer than that. And if they have the time to wait a lot longer.
Marty, just kind of sticking with goalies and also teams that miss the playoffs that are looking to get back in the playoffs, a team that you played for. I think you know where I'm going with this, the Philly Flyers. And I know we've asked you about Carter Hart before. And if you ask Dave, he'll tell you that, I'm not a goalie expert. And obviously you are, and you were an excellent NHL goaltender. Goaltending is something that I know probably the least about. And I know a lot less about a lot of things, but especially, goaltending. But to me, Carter Hart is a guy that I always follow, and I'm always expecting him, I guess more. And I realize Philly's had their issues and the defense has had some issues, and they're trying to work that out. Obviously, a guy like Ryan Ellis, not having him in the mix, hasn't helped because, as you know, he's a great defenseman. But in Philadelphia, I guess a two-part question: how do you see John Tortorella influence playing out? Because I think you would agree it's going to be very tough for the Philly Flyers to make the playoffs in that division. But also, speaking of having a goaltender behind you, like you mentioned, Matt Murray, I think that was a really good point that you made. Having Marc-Andre Fleury, a future Hall of Famer, behind you, like, does Carter? Do you think, in your opinion, that's a mistake not having a veteran a goaltender pushing Carter Hart? I think the plan is to have Felix Sandstrom as the backup there, if I'm not mistaken. I'm not sure if they brought in anybody else, but how do you see the year playing out there in Philly with John Tortorella coming in, and also a lot of pressure still on Carter Hart to get back to that level of his rookie season?
Yeah, you mentioned Ryan Ellis missing the whole season. Sean Couturier not starting the season and could be out for a while as well. It's not helping the Flyers. When it comes to Carter Hart, look, having a veteran with him, maybe that would help, but they tried that. They brought in Martin Jones. They've had multiple different guys along with him. I think it becomes a team problem now, is that, Carter Hart, I thought of him as a younger type Carey Price, a guy that's always positioned really well, plays a very calm game, almost too calm at times. And the last couple of years, the way the Flyers played in front of him really, put him in tough situations. Do I think John Tortorella is going to help that? Absolutely. I played with Torts with the New York Rangers. He's a type of guy that it's all about defending. Block shots, positioned well defensively, defend. So he may lose a lot of games this year, but he won't lose them 6-2. He may lose them 3-2, 2-1. I think that's what you're going to see out of the Flyers this season, and under John Tortorella. They'll play hard. They just don't have the talent right now to be able to overcome that, like some of the teams that Tortorella has been able to coach. Look at Columbus, right? We saw Merzlikins, Korpisalo, Bobrovsky, those guys really play well under John Tortorella in Columbus. Well, I think Carter Hart's going to have the same kind of boost under Tortorella, but I see Carter Hart as a goalie that's searching right now. And people are going to say, well, how do you see that? Well, you're going to notice he's got brand new gear. He went from CCM to True over the last couple of years. That's always what he's worn. I believe he's going to start the season, and at least in camp, he's with Brian. So people are like, well, does equipment really make a big difference? A goalie that's having success is not changing his equipment. He's sticking with the same thing year after year after year. A goalie that's having trouble, that can't find his rhythm, every summer is going to try 4 different pairs of pads, 3 different sets of gloves, and is going to search for something. Carter Hart is searching for something right now. So it tells me that, he's not totally bought in to saying, hey, I'm a good goaltender. He's still searching. Hopefully the Tortorella effect helps him a little bit, but you're right. The Flyers are going to have a tough year in front of them.
Well, Marty, one of the things, as he talked about in the first part of our show, is this hope springs eternal for all the teams, all 32 teams. Everybody thinks, hey, my team's going to do it now. It's easy to pick the Colorados, the preeminent team in the NHL. Who do you like going into the regular season as a team that's going to take a step that wasn't there last year, but could take a big step this year?
Oh, well, Ottawa, I think, is going to take a big step. I'm not saying they're going to go all the way, and I know they have a preseason game against the Leafs this afternoon, but the addition of DeBrincat, the addition of Cam Talbot, Claude Giroux, they've really pushed forward with what they want to do. And I'm a big fan of Drake Batherson, Josh Norris, Tim Stützle. They've got some talent, Thomas Chabot. Like, they have a lot of talent. I actually think that Anton Forsberg in net, for me, is the guy that I believe, when it's all said and done, will be given the Ottawa Senators maybe an even better chance. But the internal competition between Cam Talbot and Anton Forsberg is going to be really, really something to watch this year. So I think Ottawa is going to be taking a big step forward. Do I think that is making the playoffs? Well, I mean, Washington is having injury issues right now, and we don't know where Washington's going to be. Pittsburgh, well, they brought it back with Malkin and Letang and Crosby and all of that. Pittsburgh may still be in there. Boston's got some injury issues to start the season. If Ottawa starts the year 10-2, it's in the first 12 games, look out. They may be, finding themselves in the playoff spot, and DeBrincat could get 40. Giroux could have a bounce back season. I think the Ottawa Senators are going to be a lot of fun to watch.
Marty, last question for you here. I was contemplating what I wanted to ask you about, and I have to ask you about Vegas, because we talked about, teams that were big disappointments last year. The Jets were obviously one of those teams. Vegas has to be at the top of the list. Maybe you'd throw the Islanders up there as well. But with the goaltending situation there, and the injury issues to both Robin Lehner and Laurent Brossoit, like, is it possible that Vegas can withstand that at the beginning of the season and not having, like, it just seems to me right now that you're just asking a lot of, like, I don't even know who the starting goalie is going to be. Like, is it Logan Thompson? Is it, they brought in Aiden Hill, right? Aiden Hill is, he's come up through the American Hockey League and he's a good story and everything like that. But is Aiden Hill going to be the guy who gets the majority of the starts? Like, I just don't know. Like, can they overcome this? It just seems like they've got so much talent, with Jack Eichel, obviously, but it goes up and down the lineup. We know how many great players they have. Alex Pietrangelo, I mean, Mark Stone, the list goes on and on. But the goaltending, like, are you as concerned about it as I am? And obviously, hopefully, Bruce Cassidy and the coaching staff is concerned about it as well.
No, I'm not as concerned as you are. I made a bold prediction earlier this summer, and I said, for Vegas to be competitive next year, it will have to be with Logan Thompson leading the way in net. And that's even before the Robin Lehner injury for, that he's out for the season. And I think Laurent Brossoit is a capable goaltender, but I see him more into a backup role, maybe somebody that plays 30, 35 games this year, but Logan Thompson would play 45, maybe 50 games this year. That's the way I saw it. Am I putting a lot on Logan Thompson? Possibly. But Jack Eichel just mentioned the other day, this is the first summer now since the neck and everything that he's able to, no limitation, work out, get himself ready. I think Jack Eichel is going to have a really good season. I still think that Vegas has a lot of really solid players. Do they have a lot of injuries? Yes. Is it a bad situation for a guy like Nolan Patrick, who's going to miss again the full season? It's unfortunate, and I hate to see it. But I think Vegas is going to be a team that will compete for a playoff spot, and even more, depending on how Logan Thompson plays in that. But I think Thompson is a really good goaltender, a little bit of a, I don't want to call him a hothead, but he's got a little bit of a swagger to him and a style that I like. Catches with the other hand. He's a right-hand trapper, which we don't have a ton of those in the National Hockey League anymore. There used to be
shout out to Tom Barrasso, right, Marty?
Exactly. Like back in the days of Grant Fuhrer, Darren Pupa, Tom Barrasso, there was like so many of those guys out there. Now there's not, but I think Vegas is going to do okay. Obviously, they've got injuries, but I think Logan Thompson is going to be just fine.
Marty, you're one of our favorite guests. You always bring a ton of insight, whether it's on the Sabres or the NHL in general. So we appreciate you joining us today on the Illegal Curve Hockey
And again,
Show.
from the car. I love it. It's almost always from the car. Sometimes we get Marty.
That's my office.
Yeah,
you guys are in my office.
That's where you conduct your business, right, Marty?
My office.
Marty, I just hope though that even though you're detaching yourself from the Winnipeg Jets this season, you will not detach yourself from your appearances here on the Illegal Curve Hockey Show, because we always appreciate
it's just
it.
From the team, I'm emotionally detaching. I'll still watch them.
Yeah.
Still break it down, but emotionally, I'm separating myself from them.
Okay, well, we don't have that luxury because we are invested in terms of covering this team, but we appreciate your insight, and we'll look forward to having you on during the regular season. Thanks for joining us, Marty.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. Have a good weekend.
Cheers, Marty.
Too. Take care. There he goes. That's Marty Biron, the former NHL goaltender, one of our favorite guests. We love having Marty.
Every time Marty's on, I've said this so many times because he was a regular guest back in the TSN 1290 days. Every time Marty comes on, I wish he could be on for like another 10 or 15 minutes, right? Like first off, he's just an awesome guy, but like his knowledge of goaltending and everything like that. And, if you're not familiar with his NHL career, what year was it, Dave, that he led the Flyers to the Stanley Cup final? Was that 2010? 2009, I forget.
2007, 8?
Yeah.
I think it's 2007.
Yeah, that might be it. Yeah, it was, about 15 years ago. But, he was an excellent goaltender, obviously, played for the Rangers as well, and the Flyers. But, he's always going to be one of those top guests for Illegal Curve. He's always so generous with his time, and just absolutely love breaking down hockey with him.
Well, one of the best things that we and I think the subscribers, listeners, watchers, however you get your Illegal Curve content, hopefully on illegalcurve.com, but however you get it, I think one of the best changes for us for this new form from the old way was that we get to have much more extensive conversations with our guests. We aren't, nickel and diming and going, okay, well, you got.
It was always like, we always back in the TSN 1290 days, it was like 12 to 15 minutes with a guest, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes we'd go over, like, if we had, Eric Duhatchik, I remember we would always have him on for like 25 to 30 minutes, or, some of the guests that, let's say just like to talk a little bit more, to say it like that. But yeah, now we can have guys on a little bit longer, and it's not like we're up against the clock, right? We always had Drew saying, remember he used to always go like this. That would be what he would do when we had to, have a break, or whether it was, producer Tim or Rory, whoever that was trying to get us to go into break. But yeah, now we can
just go
time a little bit more.
We just go. We say, let's more questions, more
We're
anything.
Running the show now. We're in
more
control.
Anything, more everything. I mean, that's just the way it is on the Illegal Curve Hockey Show nowadays. And we love it. And we've got a few more minutes left before we're ready to wrap up this show, but there's still lots of excitement, a lot to focus on. Of course, we're going to have everything from day 3 of Jets Training Camp on illegalcurve.com. FanFest is going on, I think, until 3:00.
Head down to the Iceplex, by the way. If you're kind of on the bubble, we used to broadcast from there when we were on TSN 1290. It's always such a great time because, not only is it, at the beginning of the season when you have a lot of these younger players in training camp, but it really is for the fans. Like, you see a lot of young kids, wearing their Jets gear and getting autographs and stuff like that. They have a lot of good stuff. I assume, Dave, not sure, I haven't seen the schedule, but a lot of the Jets alumni, you see them there. Mm-hmm. And you just see a lot of, it's very fan accessible. So it's a great time if you've got young kids, or if you don't have, young kids, if you're just a fan, it's always a great time. And like you said, they haven't done it since 2019, which seems like 10 years ago, not 3 years ago. So if you're on the bubble and you're in and around that area, even if you're in Transcona, drive all the way to the other end of the city and
take the perimeter. It's not that far once you're taking the perimeter.
Exactly.
You'll be able to make it there, no problem. And it's really not that big an issue.
That was for Tikona Pauly, by the way.
Tikona Pauly. Well,
and all of our fans in Transcona and all of the Flamingos.
Shout out to the Whistle Pig, which is no more. Which as you and I know well.
Oh, did it close down?
Yeah, I believe so. I didn't know that, but I think we were having a Transcona related conversation previously on the show, and someone, maybe Tikona Pauly, piped in that the Whistle Pig is no more. So now it's
shout out to the Railer Express, by the way, in the MMJHL.
There you go. As he's got the Manitoba hockey connections covered, of course. I want to give a belated birthday shout out to my Baba. She turned 95. My Baba Shirley,
absolutely
95 years old yesterday. She's still pretty awesome. My Zeta, her husband, he's still kicking at 95. They're still an amazing couple, married 71 years. Pretty awesome. And
every time you post that, Dave, it kind of brings no, it doesn't kind of, it does bring a smile, because I know how close you are to your grandparents, but they're just that cute older couple.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like they're such a cute couple. You can tell how much they love each other. So
no,
absolutely happy birthday, Baba Shirley.
Yeah, they've persevered through a lot, but they're pretty remarkable. And she celebrated her 95th yesterday. He did earlier in March. So pretty awesome for them, and pretty awesome for me to still have grandparents and to be able to connect with them. And he's amazing. I mean, my Zeta's incredible. He still drives. He still lives in his condo. Like it's the guy's amazing. He does all the electricals in my house. It's just incredible. But
can you do some electrical in my house? Like I've got a few
he could
lights right now that aren't really working. So if you could send him over,
you know what? I
can't pay him, but
I still get him to do stuff. It's actually remarkable. It's he's pretty incredible. So it's kind of fun to be able to. People say, "Oh, you helped." You and Zeta Sam worked on this thing together. I'm like, well, we didn't really work on it
Zeta,
together.
by the way, is Yiddish for grandfather. For those who don't know, I know a lot of people do know, but
Yeah.
Baba and Zeta, in Ukrainian, it's the same
Baba's
thing, by the way.
Ukrainian, yeah.
Baba is a Ukrainian thing, but
Yeah.
it's Yiddish for grandma and grandfather. Just for Dave, some people, don't know.
Yeah, that's all good. All good. But anyways, the point is that when people ask me, "Oh, what did you do?" And I'm like, "Well, I handed him the tools. I'm not really the guy who does much other than hand my Zeta the tools." But anyways, so I want to give my Baba a shout out, and I want to give all of our sponsors a shout out. We got to give Betway a shout out. Rumors Restaurant and Comedy Club, Linden Market Dental Center, Zappia Group Realty, Bernstein's Deli, Tough Duck, Boston Pizza, Seagram's, Rolly's Transfer, Grid Park, and of course our newest sponsor, the Keg. Ezzy, see you tonight at the Keg. So there's a lot of great
taste
sponsors.
that French onion soup. Ooh.
Oh, Frosty Winnipeg just reminded us, about all of our sponsors and all the. So if I didn't have it in front of me, Frosty Winnipeg always comes through and gives me the heads up as to who I should be thanking and who I shouldn't be thanking. So I appreciate that, Frosty.
We definitely shouldn't be thanking Drew because he's not even on the show.
I will not thank Drew, but I will thank all of you for joining us this Saturday morning. We always appreciate it. Every Saturday, spending your Saturday mornings with Ezzy, Drew, and I. From 9 o'clock till generally about 11. And of course, the post-game shows, we're still a few weeks away from those getting going, but we'll have some great Jets content coming your way. A lot of great giveaways, especially courtesy of our friends at Betway. We're going to have authentic Jets jerseys to give away, hats. I mean, it's just honestly.
Tough Duck is back in for another season, and it's getting cold out there. Like, let me tell you,
Seagram's has so much gear that they've given me that I've got to give away to our subscribers. So, like,
we're actually just going to be throwing Mickeys of Fireball at people, like on the street. Like, I'm going to be driving down Corden or Henderson Highway or whatever, and I'm just going to be like throwing different whiskey and Fireball and swag and everything like that. We have so much. Or we might drop it from a helicopter. We don't know.
Whatever.
We have a lot of stuff to give away.
Yeah,
Dave has a very big house, but we've got it. Like we needed a bigger boat here.
Yeah.
If you guys know that reference, so we need to get rid of some of the stuff. That's why we're doing the post game shows: jerseys, alcohol, tubes.
We're not giving away Ezzy. Just pump the brakes on that. We're not giving away alcohol, but we'll give away alcohol related products. That's
sorry. I'm going to drink alcohol. That's
you'll be drinking the aforementioned Fireball. But we're not going to be giving away any alcohol, but we will be giving away lots of stuff. So just make sure you're subscribed to the Illegal Curve Hockey Show on YouTube. Make sure you're on Apple. And if you can, a little bit of a plea for me, we appreciate you leaving a comment on the Apple iTunes. It always helps it pumps us up. Again, hopefully it's a positive comment. Hopefully you like what we do here on the Illegal Curve Hockey Show, the Illegal Curve Postgame Show, and on illegalcurve.com. So for Dave Minuk, I'm Dave Minuk. That's Ezra Ginsburg. Drew Mandel is nowhere to be found, is he, Ezzy? He is
Drew who?
Exactly. So Drew is gone, and that just leaves us to say goodbye on a Saturday.
Where's his attention to detail? Where's his commitment? Where's his buy-in? That's what I want to know.
That is what I want to know as well. But anyways, we appreciate everyone joining us. Smash that like button on the way out. Enjoy the rest of your Saturday. Have a safe and happy one. Hopefully, folks, hear who the new voice of the Winnipeg Jets is, because if you don't find out today at FanFest, guess what? Tomorrow there's a hockey game. You'll have to know by then. Otherwise, unless they just play Ezzy, maybe they'll just play nothing. Maybe it'll just be the sound of silence. I mean, sometimes people like that when there's a glitch in the matrix. Anyways, it's been great. We'll wrap up the Illegal Curve Hockey Show now, and we will talk to you guys next week. Thanks very much for joining us on the Illegal Curve Hockey Show.